Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting of the Open Source Voting System Technical Advisory Committee of the San Francisco Elections Commission. Today is Wednesday, August 30th, 2017, and the time is now 6:01 p.m. I am the chair, Chris Giordano. Secretary Chan, can you take the roll?
Chris Giordano.
Here.
Larry Profundo.
Here.
Carl Haig.
Here.
Roland Cattell has been excused for this meeting. Tony Wasserman.
Yep.
The rest of you are here. You have one.
Next item.
Item 2, public comment on any issue within the committee's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda.
My name is David Carey. I just wanted to welcome all the committee members and both congratulate you for being selected. I was very pleased to see there was a very strong pool of people who applied, and that you were selected to be from that pool is a real strong statement about your qualifications. And I also want to thank you for your service in this committee. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Brent Turner. I'd like to echo those sentiments and direct everybody's attention to, if you haven't seen it, the New York Times op-ed piece written by California Association of Voting Officials, Brian Fox, as well as the former director of the CIA, James Woolsey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. Okay, seeing no further members of the public, next item.
Item 3, approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Discussion and possible action to approve minutes for the July 26, 2017 committee meeting.
And Secretary Chan, I just want to thank you for doing an excellent job on this.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay. Would anyone like to move to adopt the draft minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Secretary Chan?
Chris Giordano.
Yes.
Larry Profundo.
Yes.
Carl Haig.
Yes.
And Tony Wasserman.
Yes.
It passes with a majority.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
Item 4, member reports. Member reports on committee-related activities not covered by another item on this agenda, including but not limited to the last Elections Commission meeting, Department of Elections progress, research findings, and news reports.
Okay, I'll start this item off. I have a number of things I want to report since the last meeting. So last Tuesday, I spoke at a conference down in Orange County called it was the annual conference of the Election Center, which is a nonprofit. It's also called the National Association of Election Officials. And I was invited by Dean Logan to be the Los Angeles County Registrar to speak as part of a panel with a few other people. Anna McReynolds, she's the Director of Elections of the City and County of Denver. And then Noah Prates, who's the Director of Elections for Cook County, Illinois, which is the suburban areas around Chicago. And then Matt Masterson, the chair of the EAC, was also on the panel in the Elections Assistance Commission. So there were probably over 100 people in the room listening to our panel. These are election administrators across the country, and they were very interested in open source voting that I was speaking about. And I also met with Dana DeBovar there. She was also attending the conference. She's the registrar for Travis County, Texas, who is working on Scarbo. The next topic I'd like to mention is the state of Colorado is doing an interesting project this summer. So they released and issued an RFP for an open source election auditing system. And they selected a vendor over the summer, and now that vendor is actually developing software in public on GitHub. So you can actually go on there and watch the commits. And just for fun, I filed a couple pull requests and made some comments. I'm kind of curious to see if that will be incorporated into their code.
So can you tell me how that's different than the Berkeley project? I forgot what it's called, that for optical scanning, counting.
Well, this is for after the election is done to like do what's called risk limiting audits. And so that's not something that's built into the software that you're talking about. But,
I mean, I guess I would watch the presentation from them do you remember the name of the software?
Open count?
Yeah, Open Count. So they basically did a project, I think, for Napa County or something like that, where they did it was used for an audit.
Yeah, well, all that this software does, it basically tells counties which ballots to audit by hand, so it doesn't actually do any.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, the other things I want to mention about this is that they're intending to do some sort of a GPL license, and they have an open issue to discuss this topic. And unfortunately, there's no license right now on the project, so it's technically not open source, but their intent is to do some GPL or variation GPL.
So can you tell us a website?
I would search for, I can send it out, but you search for Colorado RLA on GitHub.
Colorado what?
RLA for risk limiting audit. And the company is called Free and Fair. It's doing that. So another topic is there's this bill AB 668, which is working through the California legislature to it's a $450 million bond measure for voting equipment. And in their last amendments, they included a definition of open source software that was actually suggested by the City and County of San Francisco. So now there's a definition in there that basically says open source means software that is licensed using a license approved by the OSI. So unfortunately, the term is not actually used in the text code because the text only requires non-proprietary, so it's not actually using the definition, but the definition's in there. Also, an update from the Department of Elections. I learned recently that the department made their selection of a vendor for the planning phase RFP, and it's a consulting firm whose name is Slalom. There were 3 vendors that bid and they were selected. But I think it still needs to be finalized. Like there's a Civil Service Commission meeting that has to approve it.
So do you know if we'll be able to read their proposal?
Yeah, we
that
will.
They filed?
We will be, but not
until the contract's signed or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Slalom took that on.
Is that right? I don't know anything about it.
It's a pretty big consultancy.
Good. Yeah, I think they have an office in San Francisco.
Cool.
And then, so there were 2 news pieces or opinion pieces that were part of the agenda package today. One of them, when Watson, you forwarded that.
Yes, and I think that's the one that Brent referred to.
Yeah, it's an op-ed in the New York Times that was very well written. And then there's also kind of a piece in response to that on what's called a lawfare blog that says is also about open source. So that's all I have to report. Anything else?
I guess I have something to report. I've been doing research on some of the other standards activities that exist for voting-related information. In particular, it seems to be migrating towards the National Institute for Standards and Technology as a voting working group. And so I sent an email earlier today, and we have printouts of the 2 things. One was just a set of requirements that I thought, was useful as a starting point, and the other is just the homepage of their wiki website that kind of links you to all these different things. So I've been reviewing some of the standards and providing feedback, but also just kind of to show how things related. So this group is working with a lot of different vendors and also different governmental agencies. And it's also related to the Election Assistance Commission that deals with overseas voting, and I'm not sure of all the details, but if there's federal funds involved for voting equipment and all that, it's also tied to the EAC. So the NIST effort probably will be tied to the EAC, so it's whatever San Francisco does, or well, for open source voting, it'd be important that it kind of be consistent and interoperate with these efforts.
What are the names of the work groups that you've been?
Well, the main one, I subscribe to a lot of them, but the main one that I'm interested in is interoperability, which is really dealing with data and data exchange. Some of the other ones, they call it election modeling, but they're really describing the process of running an election and what things happen and how things work, as opposed to specific pieces of hardware or software. It's more a high-level process. And then there's a group on security, cybersecurity, and all of that. So that's kind of broken off, but it's also related to what goes on in the data interchange. But cybersecurity is providing some fundamental requirements.
And there's also a voting methods group too, focuses on.
I'm not sure if that printout has a list of.
So, I have a question. Since this is a wiki, presumably anyone can
I think you need.
edit it.
Yeah, it was there. I just don't know where I put it.
Keep rolling, Chief.
So is the wiki locked in
Here it is.
some?
Yeah, I looked at, see if I could edit, but it doesn't, it says I have to be some member or something, some login, so.
Right, it also, oh, it's done with Twiki, okay. But the question is, what is the policy that, if Carl were able to edit, would that be something that a member of this group could do? As an individual, perhaps, or at some point?
So I think
On behalf
the
of
policy
the-
is these working groups are in general open. So any organization or any individual
Right, but
can
is it,
participate.
now we're dealing with the policy of the city of San Francisco, and whether.
Well, I just said I'm with myself, and
Yeah.
so
We can double check on that, but I think my gut feeling is that it would be okay for a majority to be working on something like this, because this is not really the goal of TAC. But we can double check.
Just don't want to,
Well,
don't want to get into any trouble.
Well, if we say we're affiliated with San Francisco, then it, may, I don't know how that works with our sunshine issues.
Well, I would say if you're participating in a group, I don't think it'd be appropriate to be doing it on behalf of the committee, just because the committee isn't like voted to have you represent.
Right.
But I'll double check.
But it's
So anyway, there's, to answer your question, here it says NIST voting public working groups is the list of their groups.
I see the constituency groups too, and I'm happy that there's a human factors one. At some point, as this moves forward, we probably want to provide the public URL of the committee or the commission.
So besides this, they have GitHub accounts, and also NIST has like another place on a website where they stick specs and things like that.
Yeah, so there's nothing stopping anyone as an individual from contributing to these groups. If you wanted to.
Okay, good to know.
Just a remark really quick about an artifact like this. I really like because it describes a potential system in terms of capabilities and principles, and I think we talked about that in our first meeting, that this could be something similar. We could produce something similar that provides guidance for the evolution of the eventual system. But of course, it would have to be married with the hard requirements as put forth by the state of California, right? Which we should probably start looking at and mapping with.
So some of the things in election modeling, what they mainly produce are like complicated flow charts and diagrams. So. What?
State drawings?
They're just like showing different things that happen during an election and flows.
They may be state transition diagrams or data flow diagrams.
I'm not
Any of these
well,
kinds of things.
I don't remember now.
Yeah, because you could have an event that triggers
Yeah.
some activity or some exception or something. As I look at the principles and guidelines, it kind of says, well, if we want to follow these, is this something that, as an advisory group, that we could recommend to the Elections Commission that they forward this on to the successful bidder as representing the kind of the best practices around voting standards?
Yeah, I think we should have that discussion as part of, when we start talking about our recommendations, we have an agenda kind of like that, so. we can do
Okay.
that. We'll have public comments. Yeah, so were there any other member reports before we open?
I also downloaded the brochures from Dominion, which I assume describes the equipment that's currently in use, but presumably we will find more about that.
Yeah,
at some
we're going to have an
point.
agenda item about that as
Yeah.
well. Were you going to say?
No, I did a comment about the op-ed that was published. Is this the appropriate time for that? So I thought that the criticism, I forget who wrote the piece, I don't have it in front of me right now, of open source being not a secure platform for a voting system. I thought the angle I took was a little bit interesting, and I wonder if this debate, if this body is faced with advocating for the strength of open source and security, is to reframe it as not necessarily something that makes systems more secure, but something that makes systems more transparent so that vulnerabilities can be detected earlier. I thought it was interesting. There's a nuance there that was not missed. That was missed probably on purpose by the person that wrote that article. I thought that's an interesting thing and an important thing that we should probably reinforce when we talk about the benefits of open source.
There actually are studies that are done by a local company that have compared, large open source projects with large proprietary projects for security and the like, and it's pretty much a toss-up.
So actually, I had a comment on that same paper. One, they talked about, it says that the quality of the code makes a big difference. So one thing I've found is that when it's open source, people can see the quality. So at one point there was a battle between Netscape and Microsoft's Internet Explorer, and a guy convinced Netscape to make it open source. So they said, okay, it's open source. Then they looked at the code and it was a pile of garbage. So they essentially threw it out and started over again.
Yeah.
So the thing is that that's one big advantage, is that you can prove that the code quality is good.
I think as a committee, I don't think it's necessarily our job to persuade people that open source is more secure, but I think what we could do is provide recommendations around security.
Right. So another thing in that paper that I thought was very good and that I agree with is they said, the question is, how can we ensure election results are accurate when we cannot trust the computers? So I think that's a general statement of what we need to accomplish.
We could probably cite the Coverity study. This is the company that's done this work for years, actually, reviewing, because they did it under contracts for the Defense Department, when the Defense Department was deciding could they trust open source. And so that was a useful, and very large data point that may or may not be relevant to all this, but it's something we can, when people raise this issue, we can certainly point them to a third party that has done a series of funded studies.
Okay, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss this, as part of our recommendations. Are there any other reports before we open to public comment? Okay, let's do public comment on this item.
All right. Well, I guess I was going to start with my prepared thing, but since I had one that popped up as I was sitting here, was so I served as a poll worker, and I'm curious about at what stage are you going to engage, input from lay people, especially people who are going to be the ones on the front lines of, showing people how to use the equipment or whatever. And also, the one election I worked was the presidential primary, which is one of the more convoluted elections. So when you're working on this project, you might want to start from the more complicated one, which is the one that involved a lot of different types of ballots for different people, and it's got a lot of arcane rules that are constantly changing about who's eligible to vote on what ballot or whatever. So that's sort of what popped up as you were discussing technical issues. I've been looking at some of the stuff that's being proposed for LA County, and I know this is our own county. We're not necessarily married to what they're doing down there, but I had some concerns about how they're rolling some of it out. One of the things that I was concerned about is this QR coding that happens after you punch information into the tablet, and then, or you can even, scan, prepare your ballot in advance, and then go to a polling place. And we've had the discussion about internet voting where, people's phones aren't secure and you're entering all this information on your phone. So how is that going to be secure to have people doing this? Like maybe the interface at the polling station is, but I don't know. I didn't like the way how let's make it easier, but you're also opening up for vulnerabilities potentially. One of the things I would like the committee to keep in mind is let's try to keep the vote by mail system and the polling place system as equal as possible, like ballots as similar as possible, and the tallying is similar. If if one's going to be Optiscan and one's tallied by a QR code, that is not equal. Doesn't seem fair.
Good, thank you, Ms. Mills. Any other members of the public?
Hi, my name is Jim Soper. I'll first respond quickly to Nick's comment about the LA system and the QR code, which is a barcode in a box. And these scanners, you will go to touchscreen and fill out touch your choices and tell the printer to print the ballot. And there comes a QR code with it, which got the numbers for the choices of candidates and so on. These scanners will read the QR code. They will not read the names on the ballot.
This is for the LA system.
LA. And this means QR codes are not exactly verifiable directly. I did ask Mr. Logan, will you allow cell phones in the voting area? And he said, absolutely. And that means somebody can create an app of their own to read the QR code. And theoretically, separately verifiable with the QR code, theoretically. So there's some kind of verification, it's just not direct. We're not delighted with that, and I'm trying to work on writing a program to read that kind of ballot.
So kind of related to that, there was a story, security story. Somebody posted their airline ticket that had the barcode in it. So somebody showed that and then they posted it on Facebook, so somebody showed you could read that and get all kinds of personal information on that. So likewise, if you posted that QR code, maybe somebody could figure out who you voted for or whatever.
If you
But
post it, yeah.
but
they can
anyway,
send it out, too.
if you ask me, the scenario that you described violates the, human voter verified ballot. Like the scanner array should be required to read the same thing as what a person reads.
I agree.
And the QR code should just be a security check on
Well,
it.
as a point of clarification, they prepare the ballots in advance and encode the results in the QR code. Then they're required to go to the polling station, scan the QR code, which then populates the new ballot that will be cast via the machine. And so the voter at that point has the ability to verify that what was in the QR code is what is matching on the interface, and then there's also what is printed on the ballot, and then that ballot is what's cast and tracked via ballot ID. So there's traceability as to what ballot, where that came from.
If I may respond, it is not directly verifiable by the human eye. So in one definition, voter verifiable is not. In another, indirectly it is. Mr. Logan's point was they had to read 4 million ballots. And it's a question of speed. San Francisco will make its own choices. This is something that I'm sure will come up in the future. I just thought I'd respond to America's comment. I played with the system. It's very slick. It's very nice. But in some sense, open source is not the issue there, because you could take the existing Dominion system, make that, the vendor could make the code open source, it would behave the same way, whether it was open source or closed source. So I'm trying to understand what the issue is as it regards open source voting.
So I want to make sure we stick to the member
You're
reports.
designing the system.
Yeah, I want to make sure we stick to the topic, so we're
Okay.
doing member reports right now.
Sorry.
That's okay. So,
More for public comment?
yes.
Thank you. I'm Brent Turner with California Association of Voting Officials. I think it should be noted, moving back to the previous point of the reports, that NIST has been problematic and troublesome in their approach to some of this work. So I'm hopeful that this commission will be above and beyond John Wack and some of the groups, although I appreciate their efforts there. Also, when we talk about licensing in the GPL, the language that San Francisco had put in the AB 668 regarding open source and OSI approval, that's well and good with the caveat that speaking to open source initiative, when a license is similar to what Mitch Kapoor came up with the open public license, and it's redundant to the GPL, at that point, the advice from OSI is that the procurement people within the government look to the background of the people tendering the redundant license, and if they're seeing no background in open source, at that point they should make their choices wisely regarding licensing. And then finally, regarding the Los Angeles system, that system is regarded as a failure in that it is inappropriately designed and didn't stick to the pioneering blueprints that were provided to Los Angeles County, and their time frames and cost overruns are already notorious, as is in keeping with Los Angeles government projects. So we want to do better in San Francisco, and that's what we're hoping happens with this committee. Thank you.
So could I ask a question, follow-up question on that? Could you elaborate a little bit on what some of the problematic issues were with the NIST efforts?
Historically, they have not taken advisement from some of the pioneering people, in particular, as I've mentioned, a fellow David Weber that has worked with them and the IEEE group. There seems to be a sort of a revolving door of information going from the EAC to IEEE to NIST NIST, in that they're not really embracing the efforts of the open source community, but rather trying to work through without the benefit of that advisement, and that is when I say problematic.
Is there anything else in this? Okay.
I would just wanted to kind of offer some what my understanding is of the role of NIST in this process is with the voting systems and their work. My understanding is that they have been, the EAC, one of the important things that the EAC does is set certification standards for voting systems. They're voluntary voting system guidelines. They, as has been the case in the past, they are relying on NIST to develop some of the technical requirements that will go into the next revision of the voting system guidelines. And that's what some of these public working groups are involved with in helping NIST do that. What's perhaps relevant for this group and the open source voting system project here in San Francisco is that it's very likely that, well, hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, the first things that get certified from the voting systems, open source voting systems project will be certified under California voting certification guidelines. It's very, I would expect that we will not go to a federal certification before we go to California, because now in California you can get voting systems certified without getting the federal certification. And it's to be seen to what extent California follows the next federal updates to the voting system guidelines, or to what extent they go on their own way. When they first set out their own voting system guidelines, they very closely followed the federal guidelines with incorporating things that are specific to California.
So,
it's just kind of
yeah, actually, I was planning on mentioning just what you mentioned. And if you see on this printout, it says VVSG. They use that at the NIST site. It means Voluntary Voter Standards Group. So the idea is that this effort produces some sort of standard of guidelines, and the idea is that then they'll give out, and it's voluntary for each state to adopt them, but basically the requirements that are being produced for this group are likely to be adopted by election officials across the country.
I think we're likely to see them in California at some point.
Right.
How soon?
So we need to be aware of that to make sure that whatever maybe efforts is done here for San Francisco kind of fits into that roadmap.
It would also be in the interest of the contractor.
Yeah. But I mean, there's some things maybe is a little, maybe not quite right, but anyway, it's not worth quibbling about at this point.
Okay. So any other public comments or discussion?
I would just quickly say that the California standard, the law that enabled California to spin off its testing from federal SB 360, meaning it's that our testing has to be better than that means it is better. So there's some extra things thrown in.
We should also recognize that the father of the certification process, Roy Saltman, has stated that the certification process is a broken process because of the proprietary code, and he's looking forward to a reset with these open source systems. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item.
Item 5, excuse me, administration. Discussion and possible action regarding administrative issues, including but not limited to attendance at election commission meetings by committee members, the committee's meeting schedule, and the committee's website.
Okay, so I'm going to start this item off. I've got a few things to mention. For starters, email addresses. So far, everyone wants an email address, except Rowan is the only person that hasn't responded yet, and I think he's traveling right now, so but when he gets back, and Carl, I guess we'll get...
Well, I said if everyone else is getting one, then I think it's appropriate that I also...
So Secretary Chan put in a request today, so when that is available, you all know. The next thing is, since the last meeting, I created a website for our committee. And this is, like I said at the last meeting, this is on GitHub pages. It's in Markdown. It's pretty easy for people with experience with Git to update it. And if anyone has feedback on how it looks, feel free to let me know. And when your email addresses are available, we can post those on the website if you'd like. I'll contact you about that. And does everyone, was the format of the agenda and the packet okay for people? You got a chance to look at that? Okay, it's a little bit different from the commission because we're using HTML. And next thing is, so along with this, because we're using GitHub pages for our website, I created an organizational account for our committee on GitHub. And what I thought we could do is, of the members, who has an account on GitHub? Okay, great, everyone does. So I was thinking we could just have each of us be a member of this organization. Not that we'll be kind of collectively working on the things together because we're not allowed to, but at least it'll be publicly visible that you're on this committee. So long as we can do that. And then the next thing is, remember our bylaws say that someone other than myself has to attend the commission meetings, and unfortunately we didn't have a member present at our last commission meeting. And I think the minutes say that Tony Reed was supposed to come to
Was it me?
I thought it was Larry, but maybe I was.
I didn't remember. If it was me, then mea culpa, but I didn't think it was me.
Okay, well, so it's water under the bridge, but let's just, in the future, we want to make sure that we have members present.
Okay.
The third Wednesday each month. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And then the last thing I want to mention is that Secretary Chan sent an email out asking for people's schedules because the fourth Wednesday isn't going to work for everyone, but so just make sure you reply to him. So let's kind of discuss the next commission meeting. It's the third Wednesday of September.
20th.
20th.
So are we supposed to meet on the third Wednesday, or
Well,
are you saying the election commission meets on the
someone from our committee needs to be present at a commission meeting to kind of be available and answer questions. So is there anyone that is able and willing to do that? And it's going to be towards the beginning of the meeting, so you wouldn't have to stick around for the whole time.
I tentatively can do that.
Yeah, I have a problem in October, so it would be better for me to do September or November.
If you want to try to do September, then you could maybe.
October would be better because I know that I'm going to be in East Coast later that week, but I could do September. If I had to. Oh, wait. Yeah.
Wait.
September's better for you.
You said
Yeah,
September's
better
good for
me,
you,
'cause
October's good for you.
Okay.
October I'm in India.
And I'm like an hour and a half south of you, so.
Well, actually,
So November is better for me. That's, the 15th.
Let's just do the next 2 months for now.
15th.
Okay. And okay, so that's all I have.
So could you give your idea on what we should be doing on the website, or how we should use it, or?
Well, so the website is just administrative. It's just posting. What I meant was if you see something that you think could be organized better or is missing or incorrect, just let me know. It's not meant to be a big production, but we have it's just a way for us to kind of post our agendas and minutes and things.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you're added to the organizational account, I don't want all of us to be, we shouldn't be actively changing things because we don't want to break assumption limits. All right, are there any commissioner or committee members, does anyone have anything else to say about this item?
So what did we conclude for who's going to represent us at the elections committee? September?
You.
You.
Me.
I'll be out for
Okay,
the 18th.
thank you.
at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Good, thank you both. It's much appreciated.
Put that on my calendar before I forget.
Maybe Secretary
I can always
Cheney
send you
can do an email.
Yeah, but
Okay,
now if it's on my calendar, then it's there.
Okay, public comment on this item? Okay, see none. Okay, let's move on to the next.
Item 6, current voting system and election processes. Discussion of the Department of Elections' current voting system and election processes.
Okay, at the last meeting, there were some questions about, what we currently do. And some of you we had talked about having a tour of the department, the equipment. So I want to report back. I did have a chance to talk with Director Arms about this. And he said a couple of things. Like, number one, all the equipment is packed away right now. So it would be very difficult for him to kind of give us a tour of the equipment that's being used. But he also thought that it wouldn't necessarily be he didn't want us to be focusing on like the old system, because he thought that we should be looking to what we really want to be using and not be biased to the system that we want to be moving away from. Okay, I kind of have a different opinion on that, but this is what he said. But what he did do is he recommended documents that we could look at to learn more about the requirements and things. And that is the RFP. It's a part of the agenda packet. I included the first 10 pages, and there's a list of links in there that are provide a lot of information about this. But what I also thought we could do is just read about this on our own, and if people have specific questions, you could ask during these meetings, or offline you can ask me, and then I could just kind of individually we can learn how things work.
So, just one of the things I'm interested in also is like, what are some of the issues or problems, by the department, but also from maybe poll workers or other people that see it from a different angle. Because we need to educate ourselves on what the old system had.
Yeah.
What are maybe some of the issues that would. Some we can figure out for ourselves, but maybe there's things that they have this knowledge of that could help us make sure those are taken into account.
Yeah, so that's a good point. We wouldn't necessarily learn that through a tour. What you're asking,
Well, but maybe just a talk or something like that, or discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some complaints? Remember, this is a system that's 10 years old, so there's probably a lot of things that are wrong.
So is that different than like this brochure that I downloaded? It's probably
Yes.
the current stuff that's being
Yes,
sold.
the current stuff.
So what we have here is
It's
not this.
It's not even for sale anymore.
Oh, okay.
Back in 2007. But just a couple more things on this topic. I also included a table of a list of components that I made last year to kind of educate people, and just to kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with for components. Can you show?
It's different. It's in here.
No,
though.
it's behind that one.
Oh, it's behind
Which
it.
section?
It's in the same section, but it's a couple down.
All right, there we go.
This is what it looks like. It's just a spreadsheet that lists 10 different kind of high-level components of the voting system. This is in the agenda packet. But just to give you an idea of what are the software and hardware components that we're dealing with.
So I have a suggestion for something to add.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Basically audit and revision management. So I guess that would be software.
Okay.
Just as a different kind of category.
Can you repeat it again?
My notes say audit and revision management. So revision management is like the software revision control, is just being able to track changes in information. And auditing, would be a more general class of examining data, looking for inconsistencies, errors. I know from my own experience, I've detected errors in 100% of counties' EMS data. So because it's not public, it's never been scrutinized, and it's full of errors. So I think a suite of tools could be developed that could do a lot of this cross-checking and error detection.
Yeah, and this is not, it's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but just to kind of give you an idea. The other things I want to mention are that Director Arndt said that the EMS, the election management system, which is responsible for maintaining like the list of voters, is not part of the voting system. And he said that the ballot design and layout, he said, is handled by Dominion. So that is on the table for the open source system.
But I guess you have it as section here, like EMS integration.
Yeah, and that's because
So what you're saying is part of this open source effort doesn't cover what your EMS does, and I'm going to use the word DFM because that's a vendor I know, well, it's currently being used.
I think
Or EMS, I'm not sure if you mean something different.
EMS is just a generic term
Right.
for. So what I was saying is that there are cases where the system might need to import information from EMS, and that would be what that is in reference to.
Right,
So interfacing with it.
right.
So that's not part of the system.
Well, the interface would be.
Well, the election management system is not part of the system, but there may be a part of the system that needs to kind of pull data from there, which would be part of the system.
Ballot layouts generated by EMS though?
They're not ballot layouts, but they're what's on the ballot and ballot text.
Yeah, maybe like, maybe candidate names would be stored in the EMS that need to be imported.
So actually I use San Francisco's EMS data, and I get it.
But so for this item, what I wanted us to just do is just have a chance to talk about this topic, so that everyone's on the same page for what makes up a voting system. And if anyone has questions about what we're trying to do.
So this thing here, you said voting systems database management. I guess to me an EMS is, well, there's actually several parts of the EMS. One is dealing with voter registration,
Yeah.
but I guess that's not really, that's kind of outside the topic of what we're addressing. So the other thing that is used is candidate filing and contest definitions.
So I would say that
And that there's an overlap there. So presumably contest definitions could come from the EMS, or it could come from some other source, or maybe even potentially self-contained.
yeah, I would say candidate filings would not be a part of it, but
Although actually I would like to see an open source candidate filing, and I know Stanford University has a team and they were interested in making some sort of project to do that.
yeah, so so I would say for the voting system, let's I would assume there's some definition file that you can use to kind of propose layouts, and the system would be responsible for constructing those ballots. But this management, it's in reference to like all of the kind of the information about the ballots is what it's meant to manage, not the voter lists. It's just
Right.
ballot.
How about electronic poll books?
Yeah, that's would not be a part of the voting system.
Is that legal?
What do you mean by a poll book? Do you mean a list of voters?
Yeah, it's a way to register voters electronically as opposed to a ledger.
Yeah, there's new technology that's starting to be used, like in the precincts. It would allow, instead of having a paper binder of the voter lists, you'd have some kind of electronic device that would have voter lists in memory. So that would not be part of the voting system.
I think the ballot too would be a component as well. The ballot itself, I would think should be a component too.
Well, you have to count them, so the ballots themselves have to be part of that. Well, I guess they use it to cast vote. So you could have electronic cast vote record and a physical cast vote. But it all fits together, I think.
Yeah, you mean like, okay.
Well, like just like the physical pieces of paper, you know, how they're created or defined, what they're printed on. You know, can you print them on demand? You know, how do you validate whether the pieces of paper are authentic?
Yeah, there's lots to go into that. Plus, it needs to work with whatever equipment is going to be tallying the votes.
Right.
The print mechanisms and all that stuff.
But there are vendors that sell ballot layout software, you know, like the word processor for ballots. So it's a sort of an open question whether the open source effort would address that or not.
Well, you know, I mean, the scope is an interesting issue because how many of the parts and pieces of the entire voting system should be open to be sufficiently transparent and give everybody confidence. And so if you have this kind of hybrid mix, you know, there could be the question is, oh, this is all open and clear, but hey, what's going on in this black box over here?
So I think that's where some of these
There's a gray
data
area.
files and audit tools
Yeah,
can be used.
right.
Yeah.
And also where revision management comes into play, because let's say you do an export from the DFM system, then you want to be able to log that into your revision management, maybe create a digital signature and a hash, maybe even have that filed with the Secretary of State or some notary type of electronic notary service, and then that data file can be converted into a more open generic format that then the open source software uses. Or at least that's my vision of that's how you address that issue.
Okay. We'll wait and see what other people come up with.
Yeah, so, okay, so let's just kind of just highlight so it's kind of stated, I know, verbally, the hardware components that at least I could think of are, you want to have high volume central ballot scanners for scanning vote by mail ballots. You want to have, if we want precinct tallies, it's going to need to be scanners in each polling place or in the vote centers. And then there also need to be accessible devices for people with disabilities to vote in precincts. So those are kind of the main hardware pieces. And
So maybe one other is a question is the ability to print ballots.
yes,
So either for marking but if you go to a vote center, then they may not have like a whole bunch of pre-printed ballots. So it's a open issue. Do you need to have an ability to print on demand?
yeah. So this is a question that's going to come up, I think, in our discussions later. But it's a decision the city's going to have to make as to whether to go with on-demand ballots that are printed or to do pre-printed ballots. Because that's a good point. That could introduce another hardware component if we're going to ballot on demand.
How do you ensure the chain of custody though with ballots printed on demand?
Well, there's some issues with that, but like you can have serialized tags that are glued onto them that you track that are hard to duplicate. And you could even, if they're made with like a random glitter, you can take photographs of all the tags and prove that they can't really be duplicated.
And then just as a question, what are some of the advantages of a distributed tally system versus centralized tally?
Well, I think the biggest advantage of a distributed system is that you would get precinct totals earlier, because,
So I know San Mateo used those. Lawrence, when Lawrence Slocum was the registrar, and he said, you know, they get all their tallies like within 30 minutes of the polls closing.
yeah. Actually, this is a good thing to mention about our current process. The way it works is that in each polling place, there's a precinct scanner that scans the ballots that people, vote in the polling place, and then those tallies are stored in memory cards. And then shortly after the close of the polls, those memory cards are driven to City Hall by, I think it's a member of the, whatever, Department of Parking and Transportation, and then they upload these totals into a computer at City Hall. So
there's one other difference with precinct level scanners, is that you can put it in and then it spits back and said, oh, you made a mistake, like you either undervoted or overvoted. And so you have a chance to fix that.
yeah, so that's another.
Can you do that? It's just curious to me, because to me it seems like it increases the surface area of vulnerabilities, right? There's more nodes, there's more things to transfer.
For distributed tallying?
Yeah, versus the centralized tallying system.
Yeah, but it also gives you a fallback in case one or another of the,
Well, I think it's more secure because the voter and poll workers are inspecting the equipment, and you also collect the paper, so you can run an audit by rescanning the ballots with independent equipment.
So I think one of the challenges we're going to have as a committee is that some of these decisions they're not necessarily ours to make. I mean, can be policy decisions, like does the city want quicker tallies in election? And we might need to have, our recommendations might need to take the form of, you need to decide these things, and if you decide this, then do these things. Otherwise, if you decide this other thing,
Right, but we can also provide our advice on the consequences, or what are the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, so I think we should know these decision points, for, I think we would want to write these down, these decisions that need to be made.
So personally, I think precinct level hardware can be an extra security check on the whole process, because in theory the scanner itself is an independent hardware device that can attach digital signatures that can be validated, and then that data can be cross-correlated with any future audits or recounts or rescans.
And then just a question, in a distributed tally system, the cast vote record gets stored locally on those machines on scan?
Well, it could be stored on paper, it could be stored electronically, it could be printed, but normally you'd store them, you might even store like the raw images, but actually one way to compress it is that you subtract the blank ballot from the image. So it could do that, and then you only store the difference between the...
but you're scanning monochrome anyway, so
Yeah.
it doesn't take that much space.
Well, with a lot of ballots, it would need a hard drive instead of a memory card, but it's a minor issue.
Currently, there's a requirement that the precinct level totals are posted on a paper tape outside each polling place. So theoretically, election observers could take photos of that, and that would be a hard copy version of it.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, let's remember, take notes of these decision points, and then we can include them, in our guidance documents. Does anyone have any questions about what we currently do for our processes or current voting system before we open to public comment? Aside from what we've already discussed.
So could you just give a general description?
Yeah, I don't think I know it down to the,
Like, you're talking about what we want to do, but what equipment is actually used now?
Yeah, so right now, people can either vote by mail or vote in a precinct. If they vote by mail, the ballots are the vote by mail envelopes are open in City Hall, and then
Is there a special machine to open
yeah, there is.
envelopes?
No, there's a third way. You can come here and vote physically, in person.
Is this the same for moved ballots too?
No, that's actually a little bit different. They can fax in ballots. Yeah, so if you vote in City Hall, I believe those are treated like vote by mail.
Where you can also drop mail ballots at any polling site.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at is the process of counting the vote by mail ballots. Like I think the part that's in scope for the voting system is that, I mean, in the end, you're going to have a stack of ballots that are vote by mail ballots that have already been opened out of their envelopes, and then those need to be scanned and counted. So that's kind of like the one pathway for counting ballots, and then the other pathway is, and that can also include like provisional ballots. This good scan in City Hall too, but and then in the precinct, if a voter is voting, not using a vote by mail ballot, the ballot gets inserted into the precinct ballot scanner, and then it can spit out an error message if the ballot has some kind of an error, like an overvote. And those tallies are stored on the memory card for the machine. And if the ballot has like a write-in on it that can't be tallied by the machine, it gets put into the ballot, gets physically put into a different bin, and then those ballots need to be handled by hand in City Hall. So this is kind of another process in voting systems. You're going to need to handle write-in ballots.
So the scanner also has a sorter on its output?
It just has it just goes into one or two.
Yeah, one
bins.
of two.
Yeah, one point Director Arntz mentioned to me is that the current system, it does not take like a digital snapshot of the ballot, like a, like a, whatever you want, PNG or something. It's kind of a.
It just measures the spots.
Yeah, it just kind of looks to see if there's a region is marked. So it's not a scanner like taking a photo. So I think it's a technical distinction. But
How accurate is it?
So actually, I should send out a link to this open count presentation that was very interesting, because they were saying theirs was more accurate than the usual vendor ones because they do it optically.
They do that.
Yeah.
The better solution.
What?
The better solution you're talking about?
Yeah, it's the open source software.
Okay. What's at the image of the ballot too?
I mean, I think the keys to keep in mind are, handling vote by mail ballots, write-in candidates, provisional ballots. And these are kind of the key.
All the exceptional cases, basically.
Yeah.
So what kind of accessibility devices are being used?
Yeah. So right now it's a system that's 10 years old. It's called the Edge by Dominion, and it's I should have mentioned this actually. It's a machine that each precinct currently has one of these, and it's a touch screen where a voter receives a card indicating their ballot type. The voter puts the card in the machine, and the machine displays the ballot on the screen that voters interact with, either touching or there's different hardware devices for different sorts of disabilities, like there's a key press thing. And what that does is it when a voter votes, it stores the vote totals again in a memory card, but in this case, it doesn't print them to a paper ballot. It just prints the selections to a paper tape that the voter is supposed to look and check. and then the department is supposed to use this paper tape as the, as what gets counted as opposed to the in-memory thing. And so, yeah, something else that the system is going to need to satisfy is, having a paper ballot for people with disabilities. And, one of the other decision points is that the way for people with disabilities to vote, is that going to be the same as the way that people without disabilities vote? Is there going to be just a single pathway, or?
So yeah, there's two. I think Santa Clara uses a similar system, but a different vendor. It was all when they were switching to electronic machines. Once they switch to all electronic machines, but then Santa Clara, they put in their contract that if the Secretary of State required paper, validated, then the vendor would have to pay for it, and so they actually had to. But now they switched to the normal mail ballots for marking, except for accessibility, so it's done separately. But the other technology is that the electronic machine prints on the same piece of paper that everybody else votes with.
Yeah, I mean, one idea, we could actually, we could invite LA to show us, what process voters would use with their system. We could even invite, maybe vendors could show us their newest stuff, although we have to make sure that we're not infringing on their patents and things like that.
So is the resulting system that is going to be created here going to retain the paper tape requirement?
Well, this is another thing that we could recommend on, but I would think that we'd want to move towards a paper ballot as opposed to the paper tape.
The last time we used paper tape was 1969.
Well, it's not really paper tape, it's like a cash register receipt.
Okay.
That I think it might even be thermal paper, I don't know, but it comes up and then, but thermal paper, of course, is like invisible ink, it goes away.
Yeah, deteriorates, yeah.
But anyway, and then it shows you the things, and then you press OK, and then it rolls up inside itself.
So, my interpretation of paper tape was, the punched paper tape that came out of ancient systems.
No, it's like the cash register receipt that goes inside the cash register. But
I remember on the accessibility angle that there was from the accessibility community, it was strong that people were advocating for USB input for certain disabled individuals. But
what does that mean?
well, my understanding is like the current state of the art is like there is no real way to secure against USB inputs in that way.
Well, what does it mean by using USB input?
They basically would be able to like someone who's like completely disabled would be able to have their machine or their recipient device like connected via USB, as opposed to a 3mm.
They could bring their own device.
You mean like
Yes.
like if they had a mouse?
Right, there has to be like inputs for people to plug in their own
Like
devices.
flash memory, it's got to be very insecure. I mean, who knows what else is on those?
And the standard is like these, I think it's 3mm jacks, but in terms of voting, but most of the accessibility community would prefer to use things like USB input, which is not secure.
Right.
You mean a USB mouse?
No,
A variety of,
a flash key, for example.
Well, that means, but a flash key isn't enough.
It's not, well, I mean, but you take the result. I mean, it's like what you do with your camera. You have an SD card, you shoot in the camera, everything gets stored there, you take the SD card out, and then you plug it into this other thing, and you transfer.
Well, the question
data.
is, how do they prepare the USB?
Well, the issue is, I think those generations, I think this is an example of how we're going to have goals and things that we aspire to do, and then figure out like what are the trade-offs, like accessibility versus security. There are going to be times when the two conflict.
But it's actually possible to make a secure USB.
I can see if I can dig up some of the research that on it, but I remember that was something that was unresolved at the time I was there last. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
So yeah, whatever, if you can explain more
Yeah, I'll see
what
if
that
I can
means
find
and
it.
what Just in general, is it possible for us to ask questions to the, disabled community, whatever, like what issues they have, or?
I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, we could do that. So I want to give the public a chance to comment on this item, and we could continue discussion, but as members of the public, anything to comment on here?
Just
Go ahead.
the current machines at the precinct, the main one, the Insight, whatever, Dominion, I don't know, I guess it's Dominion.
Insight?
So at the end of the night, you print 2 tapes from the machine, and one gets posted at the precinct, and one goes with the, as a record with all the ballots and all the materials. So there's, in theory, some accounting of what happened. So that is something to keep in mind. That even if you do it at a central location, you probably still want to have some sort of accounting of what is getting transported.
Yeah, so I think the point she's making is that, yeah, by having a scanning at the precinct, if the ballots are tampered with in transit, right, this would be a way of catching that, because you.
Theoretically.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Touching on a few things. If you're not familiar with the way San Francisco's current voting system works and are interested in it, one resource that's readily available are the poll worker training manuals and videos that the Department of Elections has on their website. So that's something that you can look at. Also, the Secretary of State's website on voting systems has, I think, still a list of very specific of software, hardware, down to the version numbers of what each county is using. And that list is a little bit dated. I think the version they have out there is as of 2014, but it's certainly still what reflects what San Francisco is using. So that's another resource that you can look at if you need to get some information about that.
So do we need to have some sort of access to be able to get the poll worker training videos?
It's public.
Is it just on the main election website somewhere?
They have a YouTube
I think
channel.
so.
It's a YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
Also, if you're interested in some of the kind of the bigger picture of the processes that happen during an election, I would guess that the Department of Elections has some sort of documentation about that, and you might be interested in requesting that documentation in some way. I'm not exactly sure what to request, but they have to keep track of their processes in some way. And on the issue of what falls within the bounds of a voting system, of an open source voting system, or at least what San Francisco will pursue, versus what are other systems and processes, including computerized systems that are used during an election but fall outside those boundaries. That I think you had a pretty good discussion about that issue. I think it may be a matter, to some extent, of what your priorities are, and that it's not. There are some things in the gray area that you may say, in our first release of a full system, we're going to focus on these things, understanding that we may want to expand that as things go. And the other point that I disagree a little, or offer a different perspective of what was said, is that my understanding is that when you come and vote in City Hall, that at least some of the time that you're kind of unconditionally voting with not a vote by mail ballot, but a provisional ballot. They don't try to, for a vote by mail ballot, they'd have to check whether you had voted in a precinct already in some way, and I don't think they're doing that. I think you vote here, it's with a provisional ballot that they check on later whether it's castable.
I worked out maybe 10 years ago a diagram of the flow of what goes on election day. And can you give me the address for the code here? Because I can just email that off.
Would you like to email you could email the secretary and forward it on to the, oh, you want me to do this right now? Or?
Just type it in and then press send.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Do you want people to look at this now?
No, I think it might provide something.
Okay, so Mr. Soper, you just emailed something to the commission's address, and Don, you can forward that on.
Sure.
Part of the public binder. And also that goes for any members of the public. If you have links, forward them to the commission's address, and then you can forward, and then Don will forward them on to the committee members. Okay, so
For the comment?
yes.
I was just waiting a minute. Thank you. Brent Turner again with Cavo wanted to just go through quickly some of the issues here. One is getting beyond the vendor model mindset, and for this I think we should look to New Hampshire that is deployed the all-for-one Prime 3 system, which is an open source system except for the tabulation piece. So they've already dealt, Dr. Gilbert has already dealt with the disabilities community and been approved for his disabilities components as well as the voter interface piece. This is a system based on what we call the Deckert design, which is the group that did the heavy lifting on this issue starting in 2000 is Alan Deckert, and he designed a simple paper ballot printing system. Certainly those systems, the Open Voting Consortium system and the Prime 3 all-for-one system should be studied so that you don't have to recreate the wheel, I think, on a lot of these issues. And they're easily differentiated from the cumbersome LA system. The voter verified paper audit trail is considered a failed concept again. That was initially created by Dr. Mercury and bastardized by a fellow by the name of David Dill and Avi Rubin within what's called the Accurate Grant of 2005. And you'll notice there was a $7.5 million grant coming from the National Science Foundation that was received, and then no real results were tendered. What's interesting about David Dill at Stanford and that Accurate is that these folks are still looming in controlling a lot of this conversation. What we are striving for is a paper ballot that is printed so that you don't have those exorbitant costs. And of course there's some security benefits to doing it that way with a printed paper ballot. The remakes that are occurring right now in San Francisco is an atrocity. So there's a high rate of remaking, and this is done by a worker bee that is off in the corner remaking ballots, a heavy security flaw. It is our opinion that the printed ballots should be counted at the precinct level previous to transportation, and you want to avoid voter markings. And in closing, let me state that an audit nor a ballot image takes the place of a proper first count when it comes to security, as a bad actor could falsely reconcile when given time alone with the ballots. Thank you.
So is it possible for you to email like that New Hampshire's URL to the New Hampshire system that you said that we should look at?
Yeah.
Can I ask you just to elaborate? Thanks for talking about the New Hampshire system, but just elaborate on, I guess, on some of your disappointment or criticisms with the LA County, the emerging LA County design.
Alan Deckert worked with LA County in 2006 and gifted them blueprints that were taken and then due to politics were ignored. And then when we saw the IDO group receive a $15 million sole source contract and sort of recycle some of the blueprint, but frame it in a different toothpaste box that we consider cumbersome, that was a disappointment, and we're seeing the cost overruns. LA is unique in that they had $80 million of HAVA and Prop 41 monies to play with, and I think what they're doing is sole sourcing it out to certain groups without the deliverables being justified. And so we're seeing a $15 million design contract, and goodness knows what's coming next. So this is why I'm really skeptical of that project and thinking that that project and the Texas project that has Microsoft as a partner might not be the ones we want to rely upon, and why I keep insisting you're really on the front line here of the better designs and the better thought process.
Okay, thank you.
So just a general comment, I think a number of these issues could be handled by good requirements, or issues in a requirement as opposed to dealing with a particular technology, but there are maybe certain requirements that we need in terms of security or auditability, tracing, whatnot.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I tried to go to I went and didn't see anything to the 1% manual tally done after the election in June last year. And while we were discussing scope, it seems like it's important to know how the tally works, because it's what theoretically is checking what you guys are going to be doing. So I found it not transparent at all, and I don't even know what the results were. So might want to look into how the 1% tally works in the selection of precincts, which happens.
So I think in a new design, you can include a chain of cryptographic digital signatures that track all of the data collection, analysis, reporting, and the like. So that's generally, it isn't really being done now, but it's easy enough to add. And so I think that can be incorporated in our requirements.
And Chris, if you have the precinct tallies, you basically have 100% reconciliation with public involvement at the precinct. So the 1% tally is good, but it is more than delivered toward the mail-ins than it would be the precincts, because you've already basically had 100% recount in real time at the precinct level with public involvement, which creates a tremendous amount of public confidence, which is ideal.
Are you suggesting that the ballots would be counted in the precincts, recounted?
I think a quick 100% hand count would be great after you do the scanned public count with open source, yes.
Okay.
And a big screen.
All right, okay. Okay. All right, okay, so is there anything else in this item? I do like the suggestions to have, we could have kind of current equipment maybe demoed for us so we can kind of get a better idea of what's out there today. But,
Sorry, one
yeah.
more. So for the mail ballots, when they're scanned downstairs, you have a big window with some screens that don't really show you anything. So that would be really nice if what is actually being scanned, you could see a ballot or whatever it is that's being scanned.
more transparency around that. Okay, that's a good point.
Just another resource. My understanding is that both Dominion and ENSNAS have newer systems that are going through the California certification process, and they had a Secretary of State hearing maybe earlier this week and suggesting maybe that they're getting close to having the Secretary of State actually take some action. I'm not sure exactly what the status is, but if and when the Secretary of State soon certifies those systems, the Secretary of State should be publishing more information about them, and to the extent that, not to prejudge the upcoming RFP process, but from my perspective, there's a good chance that the new Dominion system will be the interim system. That might be something, especially spending a little bit of time looking at to see what's coming.
Would that be using new equipment,
Yes.
this interim system?
Yeah.
And maybe like what they're advertising now?
What they're advertising is probably closer to what's currently going through certification, yeah.
All right, so, okay, great. So anything else before we move on to the next item? Okay, let's move on to the next item.
Item 7, document template for committee recommendations. Discussion of possible action regarding the document template for committee recommendations, including the document structure, process for soliciting feedback from the public.
Okay, so also before I get into this item, I want to say that the reason that, so for this meeting, I drafted up some draft language to kind of get a recommendations document started. And this is spread across 4 different agenda items. And the reason for that is, because the sunshine ordinance, we need to have like distinct topics for each item. We can't just have like one item, committee recommendations, we want to try to subdivide it. So this is divided into 4, and the first item is focused more on the kind of the structure and background to our recommendations. And then this is this is what the document looks like. It says proposed starting text in the subject line. I think it might be it shows this number 9 right before number 9 in your binder.
In section 8, behind that.
It might be this number.
Section 8.
Section 8.
It's after 8, before 9.
The first sentence is the following pages contain draft starting text for a recommendations document. So one thing I think would be really helpful for us as a committee is if we can try to have some substantively start our recommendations and make that public on GitHub, we can start collecting feedback from members of the public. And then it's also going to help us because we're going to have something to work from. And all members of the public would be able to provide suggested text. But so for this first agenda, of these 4 agenda items, the first one is just for the template. And what this covers is I described sort of a process for people to provide feedback. They can use, file an issue or a pull request on GitHub. And it also describes a little bit about how the committee works. Like we're going to be voting on these recommendations. So what people will see will be, approved. And there's also a background section which kind of goes through the history starting back in 2007 up to today. And then after that, it just kind of lists out different topic areas that we could fill in over time as a committee. We could focus in on different topics. And a lot of these topics are taken from the committee bylaws. But really, I think the main things here are just sort of the process for soliciting feedback and approving changes, and then this background section. So does everyone kind of understand what I just explained? And then the one other thing, sort of a process thing I was thinking about is, there's one approach would be that the committee, we approve exactly what's posted online, and that gets posted after we vote. But then if maybe a member of the public notices a typo, or maybe a link is broken, or we can add a link somewhere, there's sort of like non-substantive changes that we might want to be able to make between meetings. So I was thinking that maybe we could allow non-substantive corrections to take place between meetings, and then just vote on substantive things.
So is that the limit of our ability to work on this material outside of the committee meetings?
Basically, yeah, we're not allowed to collaborate.
But we
At all
could
outside.
do our own independent
Yeah.
work and then submit it like by email, like I could email it
A week before.
a week before, 2 weeks before to give everyone a chance to read it.
Yeah,
And then we
to
could,
Don,
oh, okay, that would be the best way,
Email each other.
right,
instead of just emailing everybody.
because
I
Josh
like,
was-
I like how you emailed a link to everybody, but,
right, because Josh was saying if everyone starts emailing the group, it becomes a discussion.
okay.
We want to have one point of contact.
Okay.
But members of the public would be free to kind of do this publicly. They could submit suggestions and we could read them, but we can't be like dialoguing as a group.
So is your idea just that this is like one document that's gonna grow?
Yes.
Or
It's-
as opposed to like, this is a template for making
Yeah, it's
like a
maybe,
lot of different.
right, maybe template's not the right word, but it's a starting, it's sort of like the
Framework.
outline. Yeah, the
Yeah.
framework.
Okay.
Is there a particular tool that you've used to mark down?
Yeah, I'm just using Markdown, and it's stored as Markdown as a repository.
It's what?
Stored as Markdown?
Oh, yeah. It's a GitHub.
Yes, this is just a Word document because I think I
Oh.
wasn't able to find a Markdown printer. This is just more readable, so I kind of,
Oh, okay.
but this would be
Actually, there's
published-
like even a online tool or a JavaScript tool where you can do Markdown and then you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a bunch of
See it.
markdown tools, that's what I was
Yes.
asking about.
Yeah, but I think once this is online, we would be able to just print the website itself.
Right.
And that would be easy to use. But, so, I mean, what I'm hoping is that we could talk about these drafts, and then we could, if people are okay with them, we could vote to approve them. We could also make changes this evening if people notice things, or, and also talk about changes we might want to discuss in future meetings. So, just to kind of go over this sort of document outline, the first section this is the README file. What it does is it just explains to people, this is what people would see if they visit the repository. It just, explains what the repository is, and then it links to the actual document, which would be the index file. And then the index file is what has, it's the document itself. And if it grows, we could split it into multiple files, but for now, it's just one file. Are people okay with the idea of just using this as a approach for soliciting feedback?
Yeah, that's good.
So, would the feedback just be comments on the Git on the Git page?
I think it would be, you could file, issues in the issue tracker, or they could do pull requests, and then I think I'm envisioning we could kind of, maybe print those out some way and review them at meetings.
How do we expect, do we expect a lot of feedback? Do people know about this effort?
What, I'd like to publicize, I think we should each publicize it.
We're allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, plus it just seems like it'd be nice to be able to receive email input and somehow, I don't know, log it or whatever.
Yeah, I think this is also going to do a lot to help advance the issue politically too in the city, because people will be able to, this will be taking place as part of the public dialogue, these recommendations. And
I guess just even today, we're getting a few emails to start with.
yeah,
But if we always use the secretary, at least, unless it gets overwhelming, we can figure something out. But you can store them in a folder or something that
but
becomes a
to
public
answer your
record.
question, Larry, I'm not anticipating hundreds of suggestions. If it got out of hand, we could start revisit stuff, but I would expect
So we're probably not quite ready to publicize it at the Open Source Systems Conference.
Well, I mean, but Git has its own comment system.
But then people have to know where to look. It's not
Well,
like posting something on a bulletin board at the Open Source Summit and then everybody runs to see.
Well, more feedback we get, the better. I mean, it should snowball.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good problem to have.
Up to a point.
Well, yeah.
It's like getting 700 spam phone calls a
Right,
day.
right.
well, also it depends if people are commenting on a specific thing in that particular document or are talking about a more general issue.
Yeah, so that would come when it comes to making the agenda, like kind of maybe, we see, there's a couple suggestions on this topic, we could have an agenda item about that. That'd be kind of. So I want to open up to public comment because I know Jim wants to say something, and then we can keep discussing it.
I just find GitHub not intuitive. And if the topic itself is not technical, definitely say you gotta find something else. But this is better oriented towards a technical audience, you can get away with it. But GitHub is just not intuitive to use. I think you could come up with something in WordPress much more easily and make it easier for the public to access than trying to scroll down and find the README file and just.
Well, it actually depends on how you create it. So I mean, you could create a bad website or a good one with WordPress or Git.
Well, so one thing I want to emphasize is that this document is going to be, it's stored as a repository on GitHub, but it's going to be viewable as it'll just be part of the website like, seamlessly. So people would be, it'll be published as a website.
So the idea is that people would have the URL to go to that specific page on GitHub, right? And then what would come up, the first thing they would see would be the README file. So they would, they wouldn't have to navigate because GitHub, it was built by programmers for programmers.
But I mean, usually what you see is the homepage of the website.
Exactly.
But then you can access history and other things if you want. But it is a website with a normal behavior of a website.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what I meant was that it's only if someone wants to edit the file where they have to look for more confusing parts.
Like is it raw? Is it this and all those other things? But normally people would just see the website and browse it.
Yeah.
I have yet to be sent to a GitHub page that wasn't the GitHub page. I've never seen this, but I believe it.
Well, the TAC website is like this. The TAC website itself is.
Okay.
That's one you saw on today.
I think what you're doing here is, I think, really good. I would kind of echo some of the comments made earlier that for your reports and some things you're going to produce that you really want to be easily publicly accessible and usable. And in publicly accessible, meaning also members of the Elections Commission who are not techies. And I do have concerns about kind of how you're approaching it right now. May need to be supplemented in some way to make key reports that you're doing accessible and usable, separate from the website. So one of the things about Markdown is most people don't have, they can download a Markdown file, but they don't have the tools or anything on their own computers to print that out and that sort of thing separately. And so making sure that you have, and I would question whether you really want to just have kind of one big report that you keep adding to over time, that it may be useful to have distinct separate reports that are referenceable as separate archived reports. So something to think about, particularly if there's some issues that you're wanting some action on. from the mayor's office, the Department of Elections, public awareness with that, having that as a relatively separable piece of information would be preferable to asking people to dig through a big long report and figuring out on GitHub what the latest updates were that you're talking about. So something to think about as you continue to, but I think it's a good start. I think it's a good start.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Carey. Just a couple of things on that. So the plan is for the committee we do need to issue written reports to the commission. And, one of those drafts is part of this packet, and that is a separate from GitHub. It's just a document. And I think one of the ideas was the newest version of the guidelines would be part of that. But we could independently, if there's a question from the mayor's office, we would be able to answer those, and it would be a standalone document that wouldn't change. And also, I just want to kind of repeat what I said earlier, that when we're using Markdown, it doesn't mean that if someone wants to view it, they don't need to even know it's Markdown. It would appear on the website as an HTML page that they could just print, and it would print, it would have bold, it would have paragraphs, everything. So it's more of an implementation detail. But I'm hoping that, but we could change it if it's not working out.
Further public comment?
Yes.
Not to be Debbie Downer, and at the risk of adding more intensity to the soup, regarding public comment and that, just wanted to issue a bit of a interesting side to this, is that I think as you're seeing that the past director of the CIA is weighing in, and knowing that there's heavy FBI interest in this subject, and with outside intrusion issues with foreign interferers in our elections, and now we're seeing Nazi movements within the country. The intensity here is great, and there's, at the risk of sounding overly excited, there's a large contingent of folks that are gaming this environment, and they very, very well may weigh in a public comment phase. So you might be inundated with public comment. In the past, it's been from folks that we call hand counters, people that advised the reformist community that their best method was to wish the technology to disappear, which the open source technologists recognized as a flawed strategy, as there is no political will for that. But they also will try to nuance licensing issues. They will obfuscate and intimidate and do all sorts of tricks here. So just to let you know, if you see something bizarre that you can't quite figure out, just remember that I made a bit of a prediction that you might recognize and realize some of the intensity surrounding this issue, as the vote counting process for the United States is at stake here, and you're right on the leading edge of it. So you might find yourself in the midst of some interesting folks that have interesting styles, and thank you for your time again.
Mr. Chair. Okay. Yeah, so, are people comfortable with this draft structure? It's got a...
That's good.
Okay.
It looks like a good starting.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, this is all this can be improved over time, nothing's set in stone, but it gives us something to start with.
So the goals, it seems like it spends more time saying what we don't do.
What's that?
The goals mainly seem to say what we don't do. These are non-goals.
Oh, well, yeah, so that's going to be the next agenda item, but, so would someone like to make a motion to adopt this draft, the structure document? And then,
Yeah, I move that we use this as our starting point.
okay,
Second.
okay. And is there any commissioner discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, Secretary Chan?
Member Giordano.
Yes.
Member Profundo.
Yes.
Member Hay.
Yes.
Member Wasserman.
Yes.
You have a majority.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing I want to ask is, if there are sort of like non-substantive changes, I mean, is the committee okay with like making those changes between meetings? And this is all going to be visible in the history, but you'd be able to see if there's any change. So then,
So are you planning to put this on GitHub?
yeah, I'm going to put this on GitHub after this meeting, and then like if I notice something that's like maybe something is like a typo or a link that's missing.
So are you gonna somehow label it as like template or like just that it's, you know, just starting construction? Like to distinguish it being this isn't the current report, it's just like our outline or something just to indicate its status.
Oh, well, I think this would be an approved document, so,
Yeah, but
No,
we
I
could
just
associate
mean,
a we could
that people
associate a
mistake.
version number with it, like 0.1, to show that it's,
yeah.
Well, my suggestion was to put a disclaimer at the top that this is just a start and not,
Okay,
a complete report. Just so people going to that page won't
Yeah.
be confused as to its status.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I can add language like that, it would just be a sentence at the beginning saying,
Yeah, maybe like in red or, something,
Yeah.
just so that people,
it also, I think, will be interesting for us to see the volume of pull requests. This kind of gets at Brent's point, is there a lot of interest and who's interested? And so that's one of the
Well,
things I
usually-
hope that, we can track or regularly report on.
But usually pull requests only apply to if you want to make changes. to
Yeah,
it.
but
yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah. But until then, we're not
people
gonna
may
know
want to
how
fork and, create it for some other purpose.
So, yeah, if Travis County forks it, then.
Okay, so then I'm going to make a motion that I move that that we add language at the beginning explaining that this is the starting of a document, and also that to allow myself to make non-substantive changes to the document between meetings. And
What is your thought about using a versioning system that makes it apparent that it's very preliminary, like a 0.1?
I mean, if we say it was started in August, and then people would see it's only a month old.
Okay.
I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
I don't know, the only thing may be just to let people know when something has changed, like if there's a printout and it says like V25, and then they go back and it says V42, then something's different.
It'll have the date. It'll have the date on the top.
That's probably the best. Well, but you don't know the date it was last revised?
Oh, I can just.
Well, just
as a matter of fact,
probably
say,
date's the best thing, as opposed to a version number, just a revision date.
And we can also say the date it was started. That way people see that it's only been active for a couple months or a month. Okay, so then.
Do you need to approve it?
Well, I'm just trying to think if that needs to be part of the motion. Well, I mean, I'll just amend the motion to say, the date will be.
Include the revision date that appears on a printed copy.
Okay. Yeah, so is there a second?
Sorry.
Any commissioner discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. Secretary Chen?
Member Giordano.
Yes?
Member Profundo.
Yes.
Member Hay.
Yes.
And Member Wasserman.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item.
Item number 8, committee goals. Discussion and possible action regarding committee goals, including scope, priorities, and assumptions.
Okay, so this agenda item is to basically start filling in some of the text for the sections on, this is related to the goals. And we started talking about this a little bit during our last meeting. And this is just it's this document, it's a page and a half. And again, this is not meant to be exhaustive or complete, but it starts things off. And in terms of the scope, what I drafted is that, we're going to limit ourselves to, the current laws that San Francisco needs to follow. It sort of sketches out what we mean by voting system. And, it mentions that, the election management system is not a part of that. And it lists a couple priorities, prioritizing high-level recommendations over low-level, and also stuff that is needed sooner rather than later. And then also, lists some non-goals. So, because I know some people think that what we're supposed to do as a committee is we're developing a voting system, or we're designing a voting system. That's something that I don't think we're capable of. It's a huge task. And I just want people to be clear that, that's not.
Could I maybe
Of course.
continue to work on the writing here, but I think your point maybe should be made clear in this section of the document that this committee is about establishing guidance, or in fact maybe even parameters that would guide future stages of the evolution of the voting system. You do talk about that, but I just think we can make it clear.
Do you want to suggest some wording?
Yeah. How would I do that?
Or you can just say it out loud? Or can you?
I'm gonna have to write it out.
Well, or maybe can you point to which paragraph you should change? Or?
I think it should be. I think it should be part of the goals section. I mean, I think it should be one. It should set context for what the purpose of this organization is and what this document will entail. And what I would say here is that discuss the goals. The purpose of this committee is to provide technical guidance, ideas, and support. But I would say maybe the purpose is to establish parameters that would guide the development of the future voting system. Do people agree with maybe that logic?
Well, I mean, I don't understand this. The committee will not be drafting specs that the voting system should satisfy, but it seems like that should be
I guess the reason
part of
Yeah.
what we do is like establish some recommended requirements, or
principles
certain
of-
ones, maybe not an exhaustive list, but
Right. The only reason why I'm advocating for this word parameters or this idea is because this notation or this quote of like providing technical guidance, ideas, and support, it's kind of vague. And I don't see us necessarily specifying solutions. I see us establishing boundaries and putting forth best practices or principles and supporting
well,
that.
and I see this non-goals list
Okay,
is
well,
we're not allowed to do this.
Let's do the non-goals as a separate.
Okay, that's
section
fine.
thing. Let's just talk about Larry's. So this quote thing is directed from the bylaws, so maybe we can add a sentence after that
Sure.
that kind of supplements it. And do you want to maybe spend a couple minutes drafting a sentence?
Sure.
And then we're going to come back to Carl's suggestion about the non-goals, but should we wait for you, Larry, or should we continue discussing other stuff?
Go ahead. You continue.
Yeah, so what did you want to say about the non-goals?
Well, can I just make another comment on this topic first? So maybe it's part of this counting and reporting, but I think ensuring the integrity of the process is kind of like another aspect. I don't know if it's worth mentioning it separately, but
Under which section?
Well, just, in terms of what is this, it's like counting and reporting election results is, an explicit piece, but I think also ensuring the integrity of the process is part of that system. I mean, maybe it's implicit in counting and reporting, but
We could
Yeah,
also,
maybe we can have that.
I mean,
we could also be a little more clear about what the technical guidance is. We could say that this technical guidance draws upon the TAC's expertise in ABCD. That it's not like we're just
Yeah.
randomly coming up with stuff.
Okay, so we've got a. Okay, so Carl, did you want to, you wanted to suggest an addition to the part about after reporting election results?
well, and ensuring the integrity of the process.
Okay. And then, Tony, I would suggest the language that you're talking about, maybe it can be added to whatever Larry's working on.
Yeah, it might be. It's just in the following the quote in the goals section.
Yeah, I would propose, the wording I would propose is, as the last sentence to that second paragraph, the focus of this effort is to establish parameters, I would even say not requirements, that guide the future development of the voting system, period.
Yeah.
Could I suggest maybe parameters and recommendations?
Sure.
And then, Tony, did you want to?
Well, yeah, I mean, my idea was complementary to Larry's, which is that he would identify certain areas of expertise where we can provide technical guidance, and that's about open source and software architectures and some of the areas that are particularly strong in the, what they would include open source itself, software architectures, maybe something like that. The other open source voting efforts. I'm just
So you want to give examples of
areas where we can in fact give technical advice.
Yeah, well, so the bylaws have some language around this, and it lists some topic areas.
Okay, so do we need to replicate that?
We could copy, it doesn't, I know it doesn't mention like other systems it doesn't mention that one, no.
Okay, but at least we could use that as I think if we bridged the two by taking the bylaws and
Okay,
using, reusing some of that verbiage, it would help.
yeah, so I'm gonna pull up the bylaws and I'll just read what it says. Okay, so the bylaws say that, in the second section says, advice can be in areas including but not limited to requirements gathering, design, architecture, development, documentation, security, testing, certification, manufacturing, deployment, and system maintenance. Other topics for advice include strategies for procurement, project management, and managing interaction with the public around the open source software code. For example, dealing with feedback, bug reports, and contributions.
So
we could-
open source itself seems to be the only topic that's missing from that list.
Oh, no, it says, well, managing interaction with the public around open source. Well, we can, okay.
Yeah, because I mean, the issue of licenses came up, and the issue of GitHub and repositories and committers and
So maybe we can just include that.
Yeah,
those
just add
sentences,
that.
And
yeah,
then add open source and also the other projects.
yeah,
Okay,
I'd be happy with that.
okay.
And I would delegate the that task to, I mean, you've got it mostly written.
Yeah, and there's audio too.
Yeah.
A quick question about in scope we have in our last sentence. If the ballots, okay, if the ballots are pre-printed, I misread this. Never mind.
So I want to open it up to public comment right now, and then we can continue our discussion. I know, Carl, you wanted to say some stuff about the non-goals, but let's just have public comment on this item.
Brent Turner, I think that the goals have been well stated, especially the quality control goals, because you are going to see vendors entering the space and sort of attempting to nuance the open source environment. So I'm looking forward to this group holding the line for the quality of the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is David Carey. Towards the end of the second bullet under scope, you're referencing election management system, or EMS. As we heard earlier in the evening, that has kind of the term EMS people can understand that term in different ways. So while I'd certainly agree that your voting system that you're targeting does not include the responsibilities of a voter registration system, I'd be hesitant to equate that with an EMS, because I think people do understand EMS as something that is involved with keeping track of which ballots have been scanned, which batches of ballots are stored where, and so forth. So, and the way it reads now, it kind of makes it sound like that EMS is maybe equivalent with a voter registration system. So just that point. I would encourage, and maybe this is okay at this point, but to maybe put what you have in here in a document, talking about what the document should contain, as maybe bracketed kind of editor note sorts of things, as opposed to the things that really say what the goals of the committee are.
Can you repeat that again?
So, for example, under priorities as an example, you've got things about, not so much about what the committee's priorities are, but what maybe the priorities for prioritizing things are, or descriptions of what should be contained in this section. And it'd be nice if this document at least evolves a little bit more to focus on actual priorities. And in that regard, one of the things I would greatly encourage this committee to focus on during the next 6 months are issues surrounding things that are happening with the contractor and with the business case that's being worked on. To the extent that in January they're going to produce a document. I was kind of disappointed with the RFP that came out for that. On several ways. I think there are a lot of good things in the way the RFP was put together. One of the disappointing things was the extent to which that report is going to be generated primarily privately, without any public visibility or public input. I think this committee would be, and it's going to be kind of, you get a report in January and surprise, you're going to see all sorts of conclusions and wording, and it would be very helpful if this committee could encourage a little bit more openness, and maybe, at least for this committee itself, get a look ahead before final publishing of a draft of that document, and shape your work to being in a good position in January to respond to that document, to supplement it, to maybe offer some assessments or alternative assessments about what's in that document. One of my real concerns is that we'll see a document that makes it very easy for people to say, this is not a project that should go forward. And I think there's some work to do to be prepared to make the decision-making process that starts happening in February be as constructive as possible.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the points of this committee is in part that the director isn't too enthusiastic about doing a software development project. And I don't blame him, because that's not his job. But this needs to get done. And I think this committee needs to try to help make his job as easy as possible. Make this whole thing as easy as possible.
But there's no requirement that the contractor interact with this committee. I mean, we just kind of exist here in our own bubble.
Yeah, but you may find ways to, it just seems to me that the easier we can make this for Mr. Orange, the better off everybody's going to be.
Oh, agreed.
You know, I don't know how you put that in goals, or if you want to put it in goals, but I think he has some justified concerns about taking this on. And I thought one of the advantages of this committee is we can provide, or you can provide, some assistance.
But that is more like, I mean, if I understand the process, it's more likely that we might be asked after the document is delivered to offer our review of it for the director, but not that we're likely to be involved in the process while the draft is being created. I mean, there's no requirement on the part for the contractor to do so.
Guess I'll let you feel that one. I think you report to the commission.
I mean, I think the contractor is a little bit of a red herring. Like, I think that's going to be happening. Okay, we don't have necessarily, like you're saying, or we don't have a channel to that.
Right.
But I think what we do have control over is our own recommendations. And so in the worst case, in January, we can have recommendations that we've developed so far, and they'll be alongside the contractors. And maybe we're going to have ideas that the contractor didn't include. So I think we can, no matter what, we can help things by making our own.
Absolutely, but it's post facto, no. I mean, unless the contractor comes to us and say, hey, you guys know a lot about this stuff, what do you think, or what do you recommend? And, you know, that's kind of a murky area, right? But
What are you suggesting then?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm just saying that you know, we don't know how the contractor is going to behave, or whether the contractor is going to be you know, go off and do their own thing independently of talking to the commission and the advisory committee, or whether they're going to decide that it's in their best interests to work more closely with us, because that may put them in a better position for follow-on work.
How about this? How about if I talk to the director about, and also at the commission meeting, and you can mention this since you're going to be at the meeting, like we can find out if there's a way we can have facilitate interaction with the contractor. But,
Probably in the contractor's best interest to be engaging with bodies like ours.
Of course, yes. But
yeah.
But they probably didn't budget the time or the money to do so.
And it should be noted that the phase 2 folks that come in will be totally separate than these phase 1. And hopefully there'll be people with experience on point that are valid. And so there may be a point of correction available moving forward with your help,
Yeah.
if necessary.
And also, if the contractor's recommendations are like really off base, I mean, then almost becomes a political issue too, which we're not really, that's not what we're here for.
Right.
And then commission and the supervisors can do that. So, but, okay, so now back to where we were. So we have, you know, Carl, you had suggested a change to the second bullet. Larry, with your language, and then Tony with your language to that. I'm not sure I understood, David, your suggestion about the brackets. Was there an organizational, something to kind of, something like,
I think that's maybe more of a style thing that will evolve on its own.
Okay, we can revisit all this stuff, but, so Carl, was there something you wanted to talk about with the non-goals?
Yeah, I guess I kind of object to some of them
Okay,
in some
well,
ways.
let's talk-
I mean, I think part of our role is to make some requirements that should be considered.
Okay, well, so there's a, okay, so in my view, okay, well, so which bullets do you disagree with?
Well, the second one, I mean, I don't know, maybe the word spec is the issue. That, you know, we're not writing a requirements document, but I think making recommended requirements should be part of our process. I mean, I don't even know what you mean by that.
Okay, so what I wanted to avoid was, I don't want us to be, I don't think we should, doing the work of like NIST's working groups, basically.
This could also, like, depending on what you mean by specs or even requirements, like we could be forcing the vendor, the eventual vendor, to select certain types of components and equipment based on the specs. Like, are we willing to make those types of decisions or recommendations?
Oh, okay, well, it depends also. Specs is like, you know, we're not gonna define the data format or something versus saying, you know, it needs to, you know, have an audit trail or,
Yes.
you know, digital cryptography link or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, it's a distinction
but-
between a high level and a low level.
Yeah, but I mean, there are specs that, a requirement specification is a spec.
What about characteristics or capabilities instead?
Well, those are issues that I think we need to address.
But more instead of the word spec or just to rationalize this point.
I don't know, maybe just it could be reworded so it's not as, I mean, because I guess I thought what your intent is different than what I read it as.
Okay, so I wanted, so at a high level, I wanted us to sort of like, we should be talking about higher level requirements, like the things you mentioned, but we
Yeah.
don't want to be defining formats for like interoperability between components. So that's kind of like,
Maybe if you just insert the word detailed in front of specs,
okay.
that would be like, and then the other issue is that, I mean, I think we should take into account requirements outside of California or
Yeah, I was gonna.
and San Francisco, because it's an open source project and you want a project to start off so that other people can build on it and contribute. So, I mean, whereas if it just becomes a San Francisco only thing, then it's just done in isolation. And so I think part of our efforts here should be to ensure that the work that's created is something that the rest of the community, the rest of the country would want to participate in.
I was going to recommend rewriting that last bullet point, which I think is the same thing, which is to say that the committee will give priority to the needs of San Francisco, but will draw upon knowledge of other systems and other jurisdictions as appropriate. Where you get into trouble is if you try to design a system that's going to meet the needs of everybody, and then you end up spending a lot more time and money and building a suboptimal system for yourself. So
But-
where do you draw the line?
I mean, the line you draw is you don't want to paint yourself into a corner.
Right, but if I'm the contractor and I'm building this, I'm going to say, boy, I'm putting forward a lot of work to create an open source system for San Francisco. Wouldn't it be nice if I could sell the same system to, you know, umpty-ump other places? And so they may not want to do something that is so narrow that it doesn't generalize anyway.
I think your other point is addressed with the fourth bullet point, which says that the committee will not make explicit attempts to accommodate voting methods used outside of San Francisco. But that doesn't preclude the committee from recommending software practices that can make
Yeah,
that can impact them.
but I was looking at the last one, which to me just is phrased backwards. I'd like to make it a positive statement, which says that we're going to give emphasis to San Francisco, as opposed to we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that. And
Yeah. Why don't are you able to just suggest something now?
maybe.
Okay, 'cause you actually said something earlier, I didn't write it down, but.
Yeah. The trouble with
But more just.
Did you record it?
We don't want to be, my idea here was that we don't want to be making a promise to the rest of the country that this is going to solve everyone's problems.
Right.
Because then we're never going to finish. But I think we do want to allow for like a pluggability, like we want an extensibility where make it easier for jurisdictions to build. Yeah, but I agree with your point though, it's a little bit too strong, I think.
What was the rationale for this assumption?
So this one is,
Kind of strongly worded.
well, but I think it's something we need to, it's because I think we need to face it head on. Like, I feel like we need to be upfront with ourselves that this is not something, we need to find a solution given the fact that the department doesn't have the expertise. And really, it's, I think partly the reason it looks strong is because there's only one there. But I think if we have more. But
So I mean, is the idea to hire a contractor to oversee
well, I think we,
development? Like, I mean, there was the RFP to do this, but is it the idea to have kind of an analogous outside contractor to act as the overseer?
I think we should recommend something around that. I think we need to address this issue. Not today necessarily, but
Well, I mean, isn't that part of what the first contractor is doing?
no, the first contractor,
Business
all
case.
They're just, oh, okay, so they're not addressing how the city would address the implementation.
not primarily. It's more about whether the city should do it. I think,
Okay.
unfortunately.
And again, that's a really odd firm to pick for that, considering I don't think they have any voting expertise. Maybe the others are aware of it, but I guess that's not the point.
Try this as the first sentence, and then it just flows
Do you
right
want to
into
read that
it.
out?
The committee's recommendations will prioritize the voting system needs of San Francisco without emphasizing the needs of other jurisdictions. And then it flows into the next sentence, which is already there. The needs of other jurisdictions will be considered insofar as it could help to develop and certify a system for use in San Francisco soon.
I like that.
I may make a little suggestion because of things that we did in 1968, that you prioritize San Francisco and then California.
I just said other jurisdictions.
Right. And
You want me to be more specific?
I think
This
other
is
jurisdictions
indicating
is.
some-
Of other jurisdictions in California or...
No, I think you just say other jurisdictions.
That's what I said.
That's
Yes.
the best way.
Let's
Don't
do it.
say
Then
inside or outside.
There you go. There's the sentence that
Above or below.
replaces the first sentence.
Okay. The first two sentences.
No, the first sentence.
Well, there's
Oh,
two,
yeah.
Okay.
No, it's, then this is
Yeah.
this is the first sentence, that
Yeah.
it's prioritized. Oh, yeah, it is two sentences, you're right.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So we've got the audio for that, and I'll just take a picture of that for.
All right. Or email me and I'll email it back to you.
Yeah, so I agree, Larry, that the last section looks a little odd because it's just out there in the middle of nowhere, but I do feel like it's an assumption that's worth stating though.
Okay.
But I think it's actually good to say it because people might question the whole project or effort, by just simply stating what you wrote there, that the city shouldn't do this because they don't have the expertise. So
Yeah.
if we just state it as an assumption,
Yeah.
then that can't be used as an argument against the.
And it's particularly important because a lot of people think about how software projects and products get developed with the notion of a product owner. And so you could certainly imagine a model, which we're not going to do, where the product owner, in fact, works for the Department of Elections and then has all these other people do the work. That's a standard outsourcing model,
Well,
which we're not going to do.
Or the project management is done by the elections department.
Right, the product owner would be,
Yeah.
yeah. Not going to happen.
So I think we're kind of in agreement.
Yeah, yeah.
Your sentence here is okay.
All right, I want to just give one more opportunity for members of the public. Is there anything you want to say about?
Just that the New Hampshire model is in-house. So for some reason, New Hampshire, which is about the same size as San Francisco, handles all this themselves.
Well, no, they didn't do any of the development though.
Well, no, I mean, not the development. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I mean the servicing. They're not outsourcing. They've just hired a few extra people, and they're for some reason able to handle it. I don't know them to be that much smarter than us in New Hampshire, but maybe they are.
Right, I agree with you. I mean, this whole point is just about the development and certification.
Right.
Apparently they are.
Well, they're ahead of us, but that doesn't mean they're smarter.
Okay, so is everyone clear on, we've had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 edits, and then, do we want to make a motion to adopt this initial text for this section, those edits? Okay.
I second.
Who did the first?
He did.
We did, okay. Any further discussion? We need to, I'm required to say this before the vote. Any further discussion? Okay, so none. Secretary Chen?
Member Jedi. Member Bukondo.
Yes.
Yes.
Member Watson.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next item then.
Item number 9, open source voting project resource. Discussion and possible action regarding open source voting project resources.
Okay, so this is an easier one, fortunately, I think. This is just filling in another section, and again, this was at the suggestion of the Deputy City Attorney, who thought this would be a good agenda item to break out. This one is just a half page. I thought our document could have a list of like resources and links, and I know some members of the public had suggested some things earlier, and I think some of you had suggested some things to add as well. But this is just some things I started off with. And is there anything that people would like to maybe add to this list?
So I think this is great and great organization. I think we can add to it, and also it might be useful, like just to add a comment, maybe after it that explains what it is. I mean, just so you don't have to click on each one to see, like what is it about Colorado RLA?
Okay.
Just like a couple sentences or something. But start with this, and then we'll add to it.
Now, the question is whether you want to include things like a link to the open source initiative, licenses, or the open source definition, whether you want to include a link to GitHub, for example, so that as we talk about these things.
I think we should add stuff.
Okay, then those are 2 that we could.
I mean, some of these things are actually in the RFP.
Yeah, but this gives you links to those resources.
Okay, so what things would you like to add?
I would add a link to the OSI's webpage. Now, whether we want to go to the OSI's homepage, or whether we want to go to the licenses page, or whether we want to go to the definition page, I think is, any of the above might work.
Okay, why don't you pick something? We could
Well,
do
let's
one
go to
and-
opensource.org,
Okay.
and that's the home page.
All right,
Yep.
and then what else?
Do you want to go to github.io?
Oh, our own website?
No, well, we could do that, but GitHub in general,
the company?
github.com. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Are there examples of international open source voting systems that we want to draw on? Not internet voting, I know there's cases of that.
I don't know of any non-internet voting.
There's one in Paris, isn't there? I don't know the details. I know who to ask, but I don't know it myself.
Well, Chris, you already mentioned open count.
Oh, you want me to add open count?
Sure.
Okay.
And there's a Dutch one too. I have to ask my expert friend
What
there.
about like verified voting and like civic design?
Yeah. So now we're getting into vendors and things, which I think you may want to avoid. I was going to suggest open voting consortium because that was the blueprint, but I was even hesitant on that. But when you get into verified voting, you're going down a road of interesting people that are not necessarily doing a service to this community.
How about the NIST link?
Yeah, the links you had, yeah. Okay. Was there?
Well, at least,
more-
there's the main one, you know, the main effort. I mean, there's this guideline. Well, maybe it's worth
I mean,
putting that separate.
Is there more than one link there? Just one?
Well, I sent you 2 links. One is the principles and guidelines, which are kind of just requirements, sort of high-level requirements.
Yeah.
And then the other link was just the homepage of the whole effort.
Okay.
That includes all the different working groups.
Why don't you just email, if we pass
I already
this, we
emailed
can-
it to you.
Okay, well, I know there was more than, okay, fine.
Yeah,
I thought there were more than 2 in there, but.
No, I think there were only 2.
I think it's good to update and maintain this list because it shows people that we know, that we've done some work and that we know what's going on out there.
Yeah.
So I assume we can all, you know, part of what we can each do individually when we find, you know, is look and find things and then share that so we can build up the list.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Chris, can there be a link to the pioneers of this work? Is that appropriate?
Oh, yeah, so let's just do public comment now, and then we
Okay.
can talk about that.
It's more of a question. So say there's somebody here who's a representative of a vendor at these meetings. Should they be identifying themselves as vendors or as representatives of a potential vendor?
Well, I mean, there's no
requirement.
that anyone,
Okay,
yeah, I mean, actually, public commenters don't even need to say their name.
okay.
Um,
Well, I would like to say, okay, I'm not a vendor,
Okay.
but I think there's people here that are representing potential vendors, so if they're not required to identify themselves as vendors, they should not be nixing the mention of other potential vendors as representatives of other potential vendors.
Okay.
You know, we're all pretty jaded and cynical. We've done all this stuff before.
I also, I mean, this is just a personal opinion, but if we're gonna, like, just take vendors for if we're gonna include one vendor, I think we should include others too. We should.
I understand that, and we just had somebody say that you shouldn't include verified voting because there was a list of potential vendors.
No, I didn't say that, if you're alluding to me.
All right, so, okay, would you have more for your comment, or
I'm done with my comment.
other members of the public?
And this is Brent Turner with California Association of Voting Officials. Just for the record, we are not vendors. We are the pioneers of this work previously with Open Voting Consortium. And we are a think tank of computer scientists that also set standards for open source voting and encourage education per our 501c6 charter. So I want to eliminate any confusion that has anything to do with a vendor situation. But that being said, I would think that referencing the vendors is inappropriate, but referencing the pioneers of this work that have done the work on their own volition and at their own expense for no compensation is appropriate. And so that would be Open Voting Consortium, which is no longer in existence. And then I think it would be appropriate to reference the work out of the University of Florida. University of Florida also not being a vendor, and that would be the Prime 3 system that was gifted to New Hampshire.
Yeah, well, Prime 3 is already listed in this document.
Okay, great, thanks.
And so there is a website in which this person here is listed called Prime Election Services that lists itself as a potential vendor, or at least it gives that impression. So I feel that some things are being misrepresented.
That is, her point is well taken.
There's a website and you can go look at it.
That is correct, and she's absolutely correct. There is a website that says Prime Election Services. However, there's never been any business conducted. If there were to be business, that would be awesome for the state of the union, but we're hopeful that the marketplace fills up with real vendors and not just placeholders that are utilized for the purpose of pushing forth this
All right,
effort.
okay, so we've
Thank you.
heard your comments on this. We understand issues. Is there anyone else? Okay. All right, so what other links do people have? There are suggestions to add. You suggested verified voting. That suggested, Mr. Turner suggested Open Voting Consortium.
So I think maybe the best policy in general is to like send links by email that we can kind of collect, and then maybe in our meeting we can just kind of quickly review which ones we want to add. Like I emailed some before and then we need to add them. So rather than trying to ask us now, like what to add.
So, okay, so then, well, so the, I mean, like NIST and, I mean, the ones that you had said in open count, GitHub knows that we can do those, but these other ones you want to hold off?
Well, I haven't seen them, so I guess I'd like to see what it is, and maybe I'll find more related ones or whatever.
So let's hold off on Open Voting Consortium and verified voting. Is that okay with people?
Sure. Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
all right. So I feel like there was one that Mr. Carey had suggested earlier, an earlier item.
Did he send it in that email?
No, he had just said something about, I think, about election processes. He had a few links, pages that he mentioned. You're on the Secretary of State's website, I'm not sure. But
I did mention some resources on the Secretary of State's website. Those are incorporated in or within the area that they can, you can click through to them from the Secretary of State link that is in the RFP.
Okay.
And maybe you want to include that here also.
All right, well, let's just, I guess, yeah, maybe we can just stick with what is there now, then we could,
I'll make some checks with some of my European colleagues. I don't know that any of that is relevant, but.
Chris, is a point of clarification here again. When I suggested Open Voting Consortium, that group is the pioneers starting in 2000 of this work, to be differentiated from verified voting, which is a academic group with David Dill, the person that received the Accurate grant for $7.5 million. Two different circumstances. I never suggested Prime Election Services be included, and the reason for their existence is when we have election departments say, well, if we were to do what you've attempted to pioneer here, who would give us service? And the point of Prime Election Services is, if we have to give you service, we're glad to do that, but we expect once this ecosystem is created for it to flourish, and that's the idea.
yeah, Mr. Turner, it's just that Carl hasn't had a chance to to look at the websites. I don't have anything against including links to groups, but I think we just want to give it a chance.
Just for the record, I do tender an objection to verified voting. I do suggest open voting consortium, and their differences are obvious to anybody.
So just one question before we make a motion on this. For the links that we've already suggested, should those be grouped under like a section like organizations, or should it just be?
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it'll evolve.
Okay.
So it might get too big and we'll split it or reorganize it. So I think what you've
Okay.
started is fine, and then I think it'll naturally evolve.
Okay, so is there a motion to start with what we've discussed here?
Second.
Okay, great. Further discussion? Seeing none, Secretary Chen?
Yes. Member Janak.
Yes.
Member Bakondo.
Yes.
Member Bailey.
Yes.
Member Washington.
Yep.
Unanimous.
Okay, so next item.
Item number 10, committee recommendations. Discussion and possible action regarding committee recommendations on the subject of the Department's interim voting system, project management, requirements, and open source.
Okay, so there's two more items. So this is another, just kind of attempt to kind of start things off in the recommendation sections. And I just took some things that I thought were more obvious, as well as a few things that I thought we could start thinking about. Those are marked to do. But this is the document. It's 2 sides of a page. It says recommendations at the top.
Oh, page 12 is duplicated in my notebook.
Okay. So,
Yeah, because of the pagination with
Oh.
page 13 on the
well then,
last
one
one.
last page.
It's okay. It's like
That's good, I'm happy.
there's not even French in one side and English on the other.
Less is less.
Yeah, so
But-
again, this is stuff that we can fine tune this stuff over time, but I think I'll just go over it. So there's one on recommendations about the interim system. There are 2 critical things that I mentioned. One is that we want to make sure the contract for the interim system allows interoperability with an open source system, so we can phase the system and gradually test it. And I just kind of brainstormed some combinations. And then the other thing is we want the interim system, in as much as possible, we have like publicly specified standards to make it easier for the open source system to interoperate with it, as opposed to having to like reverse engineer.
Question.
So,
Do we have any knowledge as to whether or not that really is going to limit the vendor pool of potential interim solutions? That degree of interoperability? I mean, I agree, that's awesome, but I don't know.
well, I raised this issue last time because my question is whether the creator of the current proprietary system is going to make their interfaces public.
Oh, right, there's that too.
Yeah, which is kind of a limiting condition if they don't.
Well, I would say, I mean, this is kind of addressed in the word should.
And it's a recommendation.
It's not a must, yeah.
Right.
So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
ideally,
I was just wondering what you thought, if we thought the chances are good or unlikely or what.
honestly, I don't know. I think, I don't know the answer.
So to me, it seems like in terms of what you're getting at, the only major issue is whether certain pieces of information are hidden or not, are inaccessible. But like, let's say the architecture of OpenCount, is such that it's very independent, of any specific pieces of equipment. They can, handle, mark sense from almost anything just inherently because of that architecture. So it itself is very compatible, either as an audit. I mean, they are looking at it even as an audit tool that they can work with any vendor. So to me, it's mostly just a matter of, are they hiding certain things or certain things inaccessible? So I think it's fine to have this list.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't think it's going to be a big personally, I don't think it would be a big limiting factor.
If I'm the incumbent vendor, I might want some payment for, quote, fixing my system to make my interfaces public, or for publishing them, or something. You know, they could kind of hold the city for ransom in that effect. But I don't know the vendor at all, and I have no idea whether they're amenable to that.
Well, I think the bigger issue is, I mean, we want to make sure it's not like legally precluded from even or not. I think that's the bigger
I
issue.
think there are more business and legal issues and potentially
Like
even patent issues.
Like it voids the warranty if we add an open source component. We don't want something like that. And then under project management, this is something that actually David has mentioned this in the past. Like the department still hasn't even sketched like a timeline or anything. I think we should encourage the department to start doing that.
Is this something that we could potentially take on and put forth as a recommended artifact for them to build on?
We need for us to start documenting that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. I mean, yeah.
I don't know if this is also for discussion, but quick in your to-dos, which I think are good points to round out. I have a personal view that the city should be responsible for project management. I know that in my role at 18F, like a lot of what we try to do is promote ownership of digital properties, right, within government, and break down this model of relying on external vendors. And so some degree of ownership, whether it's a product owner or not, should be encouraged. And so I think there's some value in having the city run that. And then in terms of like an incremental release, and then ideas around Agile, I don't think you can be Agile by doing like a big bang release of the system. So to me, it would suggest that you'd want some kind of phased approach. Just quick thoughts.
Yeah, but you know, some Agile projects are really release early, release often, and that may not be at all appropriate for
This
this.
is a hardware project.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relative term.
Yeah.
But you could do tally of like last, you could swap out components
Yep.
to build confidence in different parts.
Yeah, and the next agenda item, we're going to talk about what we'd like to discuss in the next meeting. I think we should talk about some of these issues at the next meeting. And provide actual recommendations. And then the next section, this came up at one of the last commission meetings. I think, earlier in our meeting, we said there's certain decision points that the department's going to have to come to. Do we want to have ballot on demand versus, pre-printed ballots? And then one of them is this idea of using vote centers. I mean, whether the city uses vote centers can really impact the design of the system. And I think we should encourage the department to decide these policy issues earlier.
But certainly print on demand, if you're doing vote centers, print on demand makes it much easier to do that.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in San Francisco, we're fortunate in that we actually have few ballot types. I think
So that's like one of those things, like designing a system that's San Francisco
I
only.
know, it's true. Yeah, but either way, it can only help to kind of make these decisions earlier, right? And then in the last section, it's open source. These are, again, just kind of obvious things. Like I think, unlike the Colorado risk limit audit software, I think we should have a license from day one. We don't want to keep people in limbo as to whether the project's actually open source. Doing it in public from day one.
Can we throw in the word approved
Where's
for
that?
open source license in item 2?
Yeah.
The department should be licensed under an approved open source
OSI
license.
approved?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so the department already came out with a statement as to what open source license they want, but I think, okay, this is fine.
Oh, which one did they say?
They said, the GPL v3 is what they preferred, unless, I think there may have been some phrasing around, like if there's existing components that might not have that license, we can still use that, but it's sort of preferences for GPL v3.
Yeah, I mean, the where this comes up is if we do something that's not GPL v3, then somebody could fork the code, start a company and then sell a system.
Like if we were gonna use open count, I think it's BSD or something.
Which is intended to be
Well,
commercial.
BST is, the most flexible.
Yeah.
It just sort of says you can do whatever you want as long as you don't remove the copyright. Whereas Apache is kind of a in-between that's
Yeah, as is
often
As is
adopted.
Mozilla,
Yeah.
and MIT is like Berkeley.
So, I'm gonna do public comment on this item.
Yeah, I have a few comments. What you're requesting for the interim voting system, I think, is kind of pie in the sky, but I think it's also worthwhile to make that request. If nothing else, then it helps make the point that, if the interim system were an open source voting system, it would have these interoperability things. From a practical standpoint, there really aren't currently public standards for interoperability, and probably won't be publicly approved standards for at least another year or so. And it'll be another year or two or so, even if somebody wanted to adopt them, before those will be available in the market. But I think it's worthwhile making a point. Under project management, I appreciate that you put in that first point. I would tend to, if the issue is a project plan and timeline, I would decouple that from the RFP. I think that's something that needs to be done kind of regardless of when the RFP is done. And at this point, I think you would get an objection that, it's not going to be until January that we can do any sort of project plan. And I think, and I don't think we're going to delay the RFP until after that. We want to give the department an opportunity to issue an RFP before the end of this year. So I think I would just kind of try to decouple those.
You think that should be, the first clause should be struck out?
Not that the first, first clause meaning prior to issuing the RFP for the interim system.
Well, can I just say, the reason that I put that in there is if we don't say when, then I think the department's just gonna say, oh, we're gonna wait until after January. But I mean, I think the idea was you wanna have them do it sooner rather than later.
I think as
soon as possible.
I mean, as soon as possible, yeah. Quite frankly, it should have been done a year ago. But
Okay.
the other thing that I would recommend here is something that I think has really been kind of a sticking point for the department and the city. And that is the issue of adopting any sort of approach that really represents kind of an agile development process. I'm talking now something separate from the first point. And I think that's something that either in this document now or at some point later, I'd encourage this committee to really encourage make some recommendations that encourage an adoption of that. And part of the project plan comes in that a little bit, in that we're not talking about the important point to have a process where you're doing things in short time frames and not trying to be perfect the first, not waiting until you're perfect, but just planning on continuing to incrementally update things. I think this committee is doing a good job of modeling that sort of behavior in what it's doing here tonight. But it's something that needs to be a formal recommendation at some point.
Okay. Maybe you can help
Yeah.
draft some language up between.
Will do.
Okay, further public comments
Is this the top section here?
on this one, please. Recommendations.
So,
It says agenda item number 10 at the top.
how do you?
Okay, so on that note, I want to echo Tony's comments regarding General Public License version 3, as that is, from my understanding from Lawrence Rosen, the preferable, and we're glad to hear that the county is moving in that direction. That will for lack of a better term, put the kibosh on some shenanigans, some black ops folks that sometimes purport naivete and then other times appear quite sophisticated. So we're hopeful to move in that direction. Thank you.
All right, so on this language, and I like David's suggestion to take out the language about prior to issuing RFP and just say the department should, as soon as possible, develop and publicize a rough project plan. And then, are there, does anyone have any other edits on this, or we can move on this one?
If I can make just a quick note, on page 13, the last point under open source, use, in the item 4, you have the acronym CLA. Even though it's in the degree, it would be kind of nice to,
Okay.
as a public document,
What is
identify what that
CLA?
means.
Do you know what the CLA is, Tony?
Well, there are a lot of CLAs. There's confidential license agreements,
Yeah, contributor.
contributor license agreements for for a long time I was against CLAs, but I think they're valuable in this instance, and I know Apache uses them on their projects because you want to be able to own the whole project. And unless you have contributor license agreements that grant the rights for any contributed code to the project, then at some later date you can get hung up when you try to go to a new version and say, wait, this is my code.
Yeah, so my suggestion is just that to indicate what that
Yeah.
acronym means.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Tony said, this is the idea that if we accept an outside contribution, they have to sign an agreement saying that if you want to change the license in the future, you're free to. So it signs away your rights to.
But it also transfers copyright to the project.
Yeah. Okay. Someone like to make a motion that we adopt this with the.
Sure,
Okay.
yes.
I'll second.
Okay. Further remaining committee discussion? Seeing none. Secretary Chen?
Member Giordano.
Yes.
Member Bundo.
Yes.
Member Hay.
Yes.
Member Washington.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay, great. Next agenda item.
Item number 11, written report to the Elections Commission. Discussion and possible action regarding the committee's first written report to the Elections Commission per the committee bylaws.
Okay, so, yeah, like we said at the last meeting, this is due on Saturday, so it didn't really give us a lot of time. So what I did was I just drafted a very simple report. Basically says what happened at the last meeting.
Looks nice.
And,
It's not in the binder.
it's number,
Oh,
it's
it's
under number 8.
it's under 8.
Oh, I printed mine out separately.
So
Oh, okay.
it has the seal at the top to make it official. So really what gives us news is that we're going to add the minutes that we approved from the last meeting and also add the document, the recommendations document that we approved today. It has a screenshot of the website, just to show the commission that we're already moving, we're accomplishing things. And I can email this, if I have time. I mean, there's a chance I might not be able to do it before Saturday, and I'll just do it on Monday and just claim that the next business day. But,
Monday's a holiday.
oh, well, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments on this?
I think it's well done. It looks,
Official?
it does. I mean, in the sense that, it actually shows that we've done something.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks. Actually, I did have one minor edit. I wanted to add a section header called meetings right before before we say we've had 2 meetings.
Yeah. And the second sentence on the second page, the first sentence on the second paragraph, using GitHub has a number of advantages. I think that doesn't, is that a report? Maybe the sentence needs to be rewritten. Or maybe it just flows into the previous paragraph. That's it. Yeah. No, it's okay, never mind.
Okay, leave it then?
I withdraw that comment, yes.
Okay, is public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none?
Well,
let's, we need a motion on this,
Move to approve the minutes
or move to approve the written report.
of the written report, yes. Thank you.
I'll second the motion. Remaining discussion on this? Okay, Secretary Chan?
Member Giordano,
Yes?
Member Papandon,
Yes.
Member Hay,
Yes.
Member Washer,
Yes.
unanimous.
Okay. And also, I want to say thank you everyone for your patience. This has been a long meeting. Last item, Secretary Chan?
Item 12, topics for future discussion. Discussion and possible action regarding topic for future discussion.
Okay, so for this item, I just want to hear from people what we would like to put on the agenda for the next meeting. And it can be things that we've touched on today. In the sections, we could, with the recommendations, we could revisit. There were 2 things I wanted to cover. One was I wanted to start listing out some of the phase-in combinations, like ways to break the project up into more agile. Then I'd also like for us to maybe start talking about the project management and procurement.
Oversight, monitoring.
Yeah, should like you were saying, should it be the city versus the vendor?
Yeah. Would you like me to try and get like a speaker from ATNF that
Yeah.
can talk on procurement matters and best practices in that sense?
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
And then what would I do if I let the secretary know that that's available, and then we would adjust the agenda accordingly?
Maybe when he has a date, you can see if the date works. If the date doesn't work and you find another, we could, yeah, we'll try to make it work. Okay, so, and also if anyone, just one process thing, if you think of agenda items that you want to have, just try to let me know by the Monday before, of the week prior, so 9 days before. And, yeah, so any public comment on this item?
I'll just say, I think one of the things I encourage you to do for the next meeting is something that I want to commend for this meeting, that is the tremendous amount of preparation and organization that the chair put together in terms of making this all possible here tonight. I think it's really facilitated a lot of good work for the committee. Hopefully, in future meetings, we'll see more contributions coming from other places. It's not all on the chair's shoulders to do things, but I think it's been really tremendous how this was put together here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Other members of the public? Okay, yeah, and I just kind of want to, just to follow up with what he said, yeah, in the future, I wanted to kind of get things going, but in the future, what you could do is you could just bring, kind of like what I did today, bring text, send them to the secretary, and we can kind of like, everyone can kind of do it this way.
So I guess I have a request for information that might be relevant. Is I guess I'd like to understand what the city and county is now spending, on its existing, EMS systems and ballot counting software system, whatever, all these vendor supplied things. Because I know they switched to DFM, and once I heard what each county was paying, and it blew my mind. it was a lot, but it just might kind of help put into context like these costs for an open source future.
So is it enough to get you the EMS and the voting system, or do you need?
Well, I'm not sure what's there, so just kind of like what has the city been spending on?
But some of these are fixed costs and some of them are, per election costs.
Right, so I guess we have to have the cost reported in whatever way makes more sense.
I have that already available.
Yeah.
We can bring that to the next meeting.
So, is it important for us as we talk about like next steps? It sounds like you've identified like priorities to begin filling out in this document. Like, do we want to recommend like, hey, next meeting, let's come prepared with either text or discussions for these sections, or?
That's a good point. Well, the way I would like to approach it is, if there's a topic that you're passionate about and that you're knowledgeable about that fits into our priorities, to, let me know before the meeting, or let the committee know here, and then you could. So then we can kind of plan around that.
So what I would like is, if before the next meeting, the award has been finalized, I'd like to see the proposal.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
And then we might in fact find some items there on which we would like to give advice to the elections committee, which may in their infinite wisdom decide to pass those things along to the contract.
That's a good, we can have an agenda item about that.
Okay.
for bid.
That's sort of top of my list.
And
So is that something that we can only see at the meeting, or can we post will that be a public record by then?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it'll be by then, but when it is a public record, we can discuss it.
Well, the question is, can we post it on the website or something so we can read it before the meeting?
Well, when it's public record, we'll be able to post it on the website.
Yeah,
So
and
I don't
we
know
can't
if
really
it's-
look at it until it's a public record.
Right, I don't think we have special privileges.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, if it may well be that the winning bidder has thought of a lot of the things that we've raised here as priorities, and that there's no, they're already planning to do exactly what we think is the right thing, and there are some other areas potentially that we might want to offer some advice, particularly around project management. So the sooner we can see the winning proposal, I think the more effective we can be in making the best use of our time.
So Chris, in terms of making a roadmap or plan and a path, I think the spreadsheet that you made showing the system components is kind of a good start, and we could elaborate, on that to fill that in. Well, it just seems to me that's a natural way to do it, and we could do some work on that.
For the scope, you mean, for the components, or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, and then Larry.
Well, also, I started writing a glossary just
That's a good idea.
of terms that deal with all this stuff, and hopefully I'll finish it by the next meeting.
That's great.
And I'm writing it in Markdown. So.
Great, yeah. And then,
I also found there's a glossary with this NIST stuff, but it's missing bits and pieces, so I'm just sort of doing it.
great. And then Larry, were there topics that you were thinking about, you might want to draft some things up?
Yeah, but I just was wondering if it made sense for us as a group to tackle some before others.
Well,
But I don't. It was just an open
do you
question.
want to, was it one of the ones we're already going to be discussing at the next meeting, or was there something you thought about?
I think it might be helpful for us as an exercise for us to maybe put some additional time next session around assumptions,
Okay.
because it'll help frame our thinking going forward.
Okay. And then I think did you have some ideas around Agile?
For sure, yeah.
Okay, maybe that would be a good thing then.
And procurement.
Okay, great. So, well, good. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
The next meeting. Is that still TBD?
Is it the fourth Wednesday?
Oh,
The only responses we've gotten about who cannot make certain dates was from Tony and Rowan.
wasn't it only October that there was a conflict? Because next month it was.
I have,
we're-
I think my family's screwed up, but on Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday, I can be here until 7:40,
Right.
because at 8 o'clock I have to be at the Orpheum.
Oh, what if we tried to move up the meeting earlier? Would that work?
He's come.
It's
Carl's
okay.
coming from- Oh, really? Okay.
Well, it's, I mean,
Maybe just as close, we could try to meet at 5 if it's free.
What date are we talking about?
Wednesday, the 27th of September. My bad.
Okay, we can try. I have to be on the East Coast at some point around, so I'll know more later.
Wait, what is the date?
I have to be on the East Coast, likely the week of the 25th. I'm not sure yet, it hasn't been confirmed. But 20th would be more likely for me that I could do.
What's
That's
the
elections
fourth
committee
Wednesday?
date.
well, that's the third.
4th is the 27th.
Oh, it is. the Thursday.
Yeah, the election committee meets on the 20th.
Oh, right. Okay, so you can't make the fourth Wednesday.
It's unlikely. I don't
Okay.
know for sure yet, because the
I
project
mean,
hasn't been
I'm okay with making it the third Thursday that month or something, or
Well then,
another day of the.
So then what we'll do is we'll have Don will kind of revisit the schedule and then see, try to decide something between now and then.
Real quick, does the week of 18th work for anyone outside of a Wednesday, just for that 1 month?
Yeah,
Because that does for me.
yeah, I can do any day that week.
Which,
The week of the 18th.
oh, I see.
Yeah, the 20th is,
Oh,
Wednesday.
so like maybe Thursday or?
Yeah, that people.
yeah, the
can-
day after the elections committee meeting, yeah,
Mhm.
that works for me.
Okay, I'll ask around and see if we can get him.
Let's see what Ron has.
Yeah, I think Rowan's in town, but. Okay, well, great. Well, that concludes the meeting. The time is now 9:07 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. For a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks, adjourned.